Hey guys. This is part 10 and finale of What If Naruto went back in time but ended up in the wrong timeline. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start. Chapter 88. Sakura's skin felt wrong. Stretched, thin, ill-fitting on her bones, like paper wrapped over a mass too big for it to hold. Her muscles were different, her insides changed. Piece by piece, bit by bit her mind catalogued the changes, the wrongness, and bit by bit another part of her mind rebelled, reminded her that no, her body was not wrong. She was wrong, out of place. Sakura? The voice was familiar yet not, tickling the back of her skull, and yet the voice of a stranger. She turns, and it's a young woman she knows but can never remember meeting. Kyofu. The name she'd never learned came easily as she looked on her face, wide-eyed and confused. It was disorienting, the experience growing disturbing and grotesque. "Get out of here!" she demanded. Kyofu's gaze narrowed. "He'll kill you alone!" No, he won't. She'd faced worse and lived. "It's all right," she said as calmly as she could, eyes raking over the signs of injury the woman could barely hide. "I've got dash." Her words of reassurance were cut short. The attack was sudden, powerful. Her chakra moved in familiar ways through an alien limb, too thin. The muscles were there but built and focused in the wrong places. A limb for speed, not power. She'd make do. Her fist smashed into the red armored gauntlet, the armor cracking with bone-breaking crunches, splinters of shattered metal clinking as they hit the ground like shards of glass. She'd met Han before, and yet she hadn't. She'd fought him before and yet had not. And this Han was familiar but different. It wasn't empty eyes that looked back at her, it was seething, tightly coiled anger. The pupils were thin as pinpricks, but they were there. Not the Rinnegan. The Jinchuriki stepped forward, into her guard, trying to shoulder check her to force an opening before her foot whipped out, catching him at the knee, and her free elbow drove sharply into his ribs. It felt like striking a mountain. No matter. She'd shattered mountains before. Han was driven back and she pushed the advantage, rushing and reaching for a tanto she had on her waist that she couldn't remember having placed there. The grip fit her hand. She drew it smoothly, with a practiced ease, even as her mind fumbled for why she held a sword in the first place. Han rallied, pivoting and striking out with his remaining fist in a blow that would have turned her organs to pulp if it caught her. She could feel the shockwave of force driving through his limb. She twisted, her body avoiding the blow with a flexibility she didn't know she had before. Her mind was shoved out of its awareness, and the next thing she realized, she was wrapped around that arm, one leg coiled tightly around the extended limb, the other around Han's waist as one arm wrapped around the man's throat, and the other brought that tanto high to drive it down through the juncture of his collarbone, to slip it smoothly between the armor plates. She was confused, and yet not. Her mind on one side recoiling at what and how she'd managed this hold, even as the other part of her focus moved chakra through her limbs and body to make her hold nigh unbreakable by channeling Tsunade's legendary strength. The blade drove down. But Han was just as strong as she was. Stronger, he moved, at the last moment, the thick shoulder guard catching the force of her blade, the edge of the weapon scraping by with a squeal of metal against metal. Steam burst from his body, hot, boiling hot. Her limbs burned. Her mind wrestled full control back from the instinct, her medical training taking over as healing chakra flooded her limbs, and she vanished in a puff of smoke, reappearing meters away, already healing the burn scars that would form had it been any other combatant. "Attack him, hard and fast," one mind said. No, another answered. "He thinks you're hurt. Draw him in." Her conscious thoughts were flooded with ideas, possibilities, stratagems, techniques. Pain throbbed behind her eyes and skull. She suppressed a groan as blood pounded through her temples. "You!" Han's voice made her eyes snap towards the Jinchuriki. She'd never heard it, in either lifetime. His eyes were wary, watching her carefully. "You do not match the intel on your bingo book profile." She smirked. "I'm just full of surprises." His answer was to charge. Sakura lifted her foot, and stomped down into the ground. The earth heaved. Han stumbled, eyes going wide as the ground rippled out from the point of impact like a wave of liquid, collapsing inwards. He leapt. And she was on him. She sheathed the sword, her fangs lengthening, her grin growing serpentine as venom dripped from the tips, hands glowing with the blue flames of a chakra scalpel. He tried to fight her off, but with one arm, suspended in the air, off guard. He was easy. Her spit burned at his eyes. He reeled with a scream as his eyeballs hissed and boiled. The chakra scalpels cut into his arm, turning it useless, her body wrapped around his. Steam once more burst from him, but she was ready this time. Healing chakra surged through her limbs, under her skin, healing the damage as it was formed, forcing herself to endure the pain, the agony of having her skin burned and regrown. She dove in for the kill. The steam roiled, shifting and coiling, and she knew what was happening. She leapt away seconds before a claw of superheated steam would have grabbed hold of her to cook her alive. Landing on nimble feet, she breathed harshly, feeling her lips and gums tingling from the technique she'd never used that was still familiar. Orochimaru, she remembered suddenly, with a sharp start. I'm Orochimaru's student. Han blinked, tears leaking from bloodied eyes as his chakra reformed the sclera and pupils, steam boiling in a cloud around him. The Jinchuriki whirled suddenly, the armored flesh arms smashing harshly against a surprise assault, deflecting a kunai with a screech of steel against steel as Sakura suddenly saw Sasuke leap over the man to land at her side. TSCH. The Uchiha scoffed. So much for a quick end to that. She blinked, green eyes watching him closely. When he turned his gaze onto her, she found the exact same searching look she knew she had, reflected back at her. Kuratsuchi could feel it. She was dying. Her insides were burning, the poison, whatever it was, seemed to be taking effect faster now. No doubt because of how much she was moving, how much she was exhausting herself. She was dying. A part of her wondered why she still fought. Why she bothered. Her family, all of them dead. Her country, if she ever had one, wished her dead. She wondered if it was spite that drove her. Raw defiance. If it would really be so hard to just let her blade slip, let an attack go through. Why bother? Who would bother? This was not Han, or Fukuro or Sasori, or any of the IWA Nin. They wanted Naruto, and she had no reason to keep him from them. Was it the habit of survival? She wasn't sure. In truth, there was only one thing she wanted now, one thing perhaps that was keeping her going. Han. She swore she would kill him. If for nothing else, if she breathed her last coughing death into Han's face, it would be enough. Everything, all of it could be laid at his feet. Hatred, she found, was a decent enough anesthetic for her purposes. Futon de Tapa! The blast of wind smashes through the forest, uprooting trees and carving a trench through the ground. Kuratsuchi feels her lungs burn as she sucks down a breath, as she forces her limbs to move, swerving to the side and leaping off of another tree to bypass the blast and charge towards Ryoko. She drew Kuta's sword, the ring of steel singing through the trees before clashing loudly against steel as Ryoko deflected the strike with her Fuma shuriken, another swing, and another deflect before the Konoha Kunoichi retaliated with a spinning swing that forced Kuratsuhi to back off, wind blades scattering out of the whirling Fuma shuriken like an insane dervish. Ryoko adjusted her grip on the weapon, slowing the spin before, charging in with a roar as Kuratsuchi tossed a volley of shuriken that were battered aside by that spinning Fuma blade. The silver-haired Kunoichi's body seemed to fade, the image of her torso and limbs segmenting and splitting before reforming, the minor genjutsu letting her close the distance as Kuratsuchi took the split second necessary to dispel it. She barely had the time to draw the sword scabbard from her hip, the strong, ancient wood of the sheath tanking the force of a brutal kick, leaving the blade free to scream as its metal smashed into the swinging Fuma shuriken in a frantic block from the other side. The fist that smashed into her gut caught the IWA princess off guard, the air exploding from her lungs as Ryoko's body split and reformed again, now on the ground, below and inside her guard. The fist to the stomach was followed by an elbow to the jaw, then a knee to the ribs and a kick to the chest that knocked her back, sending her slamming into a tree, but she had no time to catch her breath. Reflex and instinct forced her to move. Planting her 2 feet on the tree, she leapt with what little strength she had, just barely rising over the blast of wind that tore the tree she'd been leaning against to pieces. Her lungs were burning, her head was swimming, and still she managed to gather enough wits to toss a single, explosive tag-marked kunai downwards. The blast sent up smoke, dirt and debris, giving her a very brief window of cover to suck down a ragged breath of air and start coughing it, and her lung up her windpipe the second her feet touched the floor. The dust and grit stung her eyes, irritated her already burning throat, and this brief moment was her only respite before she was subjected to a barrage of smaller wind blasts. The dust of her tossed kunai blast let her see the attacks as they came. Ducking and weaving, she tried not to notice the shaking of her limbs, forcing them to keep moving, keep fighting. She only had to endure a short while. This wouldn't last. She was right. Ryoko was a close-range fighter, and wind was not a long-range suited element. The woman closed the distance, descending from above and to the left, and Kyofu was ready for her. Can you contain him? The question made Sasuke pause, two minds warring with each other on what she meant before one remembered. No, he said as he watched Han stand, the damaged eyes blinking to a normal, undamaged state, glaring at the both of them as his chakra/steam arm grew more corporeal, more dangerous. That ability was tied to the Sharingan. Sakura nodded. I figured. She drew her tanto again, and held it out to him, hilt first. He took it, offering a muttered thanks. He held it firm, tilting it lightly in his grip, testing the weight, the balance. It was fitted to her hand, her weight, her strength. Lighter than what he was used to, but well forged. It would suffice. Options? A fair question. Without his Sharingan, much of his arsenal was unavailable. But the Sharingan was a tool, not a crutch. Follow me in. She did. His body was slower, its mastery over the lightning element, less, but its chakra control was sharper than his, its physical strength noticeably increased as well. He was fighting in an alien body that was his and yet was not, knowledge of its capabilities but no experience of having ever used it. Interesting was a word that came to mind to describe it. He approached Han from the left, knowing Sakura would move on his right. Han's eyes darted this way and that way, tracking them both, his guard up with armored fist and the steam claw ready to whip out and snare one of them, boiling them alive in its grasp. He dove in close, and Han swiped. Sasuke felt the earth split under his feet, parted by chakra as Sakura moved the very ground to help. His mind reeled, caught off guard before another reminded him of the training they'd done, the moves they'd used 100 times before. He sank up to his waist, the chakra claw passing over his head, and Sasuke gripped the tanto in his hands, twisting it in a reverse grip as the soft mud heaved and spat him upwards to let him slice at Han's exposed side. The blade squealed as it struck metal, the edge digging but not breaking through the thick plate. He heard the Jinchuriki grunt, surprise on his features before that arm turned, angling unnaturally, in a way no normal arm could to reach for him. The Chidori Nagashi screeched through the air. Steam was a different form of water, but it was still water. The volts crackled through the air, leaping from his flesh onto the blade, into the armor and across the individual droplets that made up the superheated gas. Han's control slipped, the claw of boiling hot steam becoming a cloud thinning quickly as it sought to escape everywhere through the air. Sasuke's free hand formed his seals, chakra building up in his throat as he breathed a column of flames directly at the Jinchuriki, blasting him in the face at point-blank range. Han's body tilted away, like a tree under a fierce wind. Sasuke felt hands wrap around his feet and snapped his gaze down in surprise, confused only for a second as he saw Sakura's slender fingers there rather than the Jinchuriki's armored fist. She yanked him down the earth, swallowing him a split second before he saw Han's body crumble to mud and the explosive tags go off with a blast that shook the air in his lungs even underground. Seconds later the earth spat him back out, Sakura beside him. Sloppy, he self-recriminated. You're not used to relying on your senses without the Sharingan to help, she explained. She was right, it didn't change the sting in his pride admitting such. I didn't know you'd gotten so adept at using earth chakra. I haven't, she answered, shaking her head. Lean into instincts. Our other selves haven't been slacking this whole time and this is their body, we're just. She looked unsure. Almost queasy, borrowing it. HN. There's a rustle of leaves above and both of them turn their gazes skyward to see gathering steam clouds roiling above them, blocking out the canopy above and blotting out the sun. His eyes narrowed. If we push him, he'll summon the Gobi, he cautioned. Then we have to kill him fast or have a counter ready if he does. Sakura answered. He nodded. A counter, to a monster of steam. Sasuke trailed his eyes upwards. The heat wasn't enough, but the moisture could carry easier, make the process faster. That he could use but not yet. He needed something extra here. With barely a glance, he formed a water clone, and quickly, the construct rushed away bounding through the trees to escape the combat zone. We need more steam, he commented. And we need to find Naruto Dash. He was missing, yes, he remembered that's why they'd come. The idiot was out here somewhere. With a swing of Kuto's blade, the Fuma shuriken and sword screamed as metal rent metal, sparks scattering off the gouged steel. Kuratsuchi was not a natural swordswoman she trained since acquiring the blade, but it had never been her preferred method of fighting. Ryoko by contrast used her Fuma shuriken, which should have been cumbersome and unwieldy like a natural extension of her arms, spinning, twisting, mixing in punches and kicks in the openings the monstrous weapon forced in her guard. Like an epiphany, an answer came to her. Move your enemy, do not be moved by him. The weapons clashed, and this time, they locked. Kuratsuchi drew up her leg and with a slam of her boot onto the ground, spikes of stone erupted from the mud, like a closing jagged maw of teeth. Ryoko leapt up, high into the air, escaping the stone spears and answering with another drilling wind blast. Kuratsuchi slammed her hands into the earth, a wall of mud rising to take hit. Even as it crumbled, her chakra was at work, reshaping and reforming the mud wall into a serpentine dragon head. The construct opened its gaping maw, spitting out stone spikes like javelins as it rose into the air, chasing after Ryoko. The kunoichi's Fuma shuriken was wreathed in wind blades, the razor blade-like element tearing through the stone, turning the rock to ground dust. But she was being driven back, and that's what Kuratsuchi wanted. With half her focus on maintaining the construct, the rest of her focus moved to her other element. Fire. Because she didn't have to win. Not really. Sucking down a breath that felt like razor blades, she drew all of the chakra she could into herself. Then she breathed. It wasn't often that Han felt himself truly caught off guard, so completely flat-footed that he had no ready response come to mind. But these two were very much pulling that off. He read the files on all associated with the Uzumaki. Any one of them could be a target, or an obstacle at a given moment. His students were very much a part of that list. The Uchiha was a medic, one who favored close combat, though he hadn't mastered Tsunade's legendary strength, and while that so far seemed to be proving partly true in terms of his preference for close combat, the sheer range of his elemental capabilities was not something Han expected. What's more, though Han, like most Jinchuriki skilled enough, was nearly immune to genjutsu, he could almost feel the Uchiha's slithering, serpentine touch on his mind. Probing for weaknesses, becoming ever more insidious with every attempt, less clumsy, more precise and targeted. Soon, Han wasn't sure he could trust his natural resistance to illusions to wholly safeguard him. Haruno as well. Her strength was on par with Tsunade's, on par with his own. And that was not something that should be possible. He could barely overpower her, and even then not without considerable effort the Uchiha would never let him exert without intervening to help. What's more, it seemed she was the medic of the pair, a skilled one that was able to keep both of them in top form even as the battle lasted long enough it would have all but wiped out any other combatants by attrition already. Her repertoire of tricks was as wily as he'd read. He recognized Orochimaru's serpentine fighting forms, her use of poisons, manipulating her body into contortions that shouldn't be possible, stretching and twisting in abnormal ways. These, too, were far more dangerous than he'd been led to believe. Was that deliberate on their part? Or merely bad intel? He shifted between the trees, the cloud of steam aided his stealth, but he saw no openings to press the attack. Suddenly, the Uchiha straightened. Found him! Sakura! East, about 150 meters, the Haruno moved immediately, rushing away, and Han knew instantly who they were talking about. No way could he allow that to happen. He rushed, moving to intercept, and more importantly, get ahead of her. But before he could take more than a step or two forward, suddenly, the Uchiha was in his face, a knee crashing into Han's raised forearm with strength that would have shattered the limb were he anyone else. I don't think so, the boy hissed, before attacking with a flurry of blows, a punch, a kick, a slash of his blade, a thrown kunai that nearly buried itself in Han's eye. The next sword swipe Han battered aside, stepping into the Uchiha's guard before swinging a straight drive punch onto the boy's face. He pulled back, and Han's knuckles barely grazed him, but that was enough to knock him off his feet, sending him sprawling onto the forest floor. Han leapt, not high, just enough to close the distance, slamming down with driving knees and a fist that cratered the earth as the Uchiha vanished in a burst of crackling lightning, the volts snaking up Han's extended arm making his muscles spasm and jump. He reappeared at Han's back, and it was all the Jinchuriki could do to avoid that tanto from slitting open his throat. Sasuke responded by landing 2 solid elbows onto the back of Han's skull. The boy's strength was not on the level of Tsunade's or the Haruno's, but he was not weak either. The first blow dazed him, the second sent spots through his vision, and he knew that a third, or worse, would put him down. He felt the boy pull back for that third blow, and pivoting on his knees, he drove his kneecap into the side of the Uchiha's bent knee, knocking him off balance before Han fully twisted, throwing himself onto the dirt on his back and lashing out with a kick from the ground. It caught the Uchiha in the ribs, and even with the lack of form and drive that robbed the blow of much of its power, Han still felt ribs break, still saw blood explode from the boy's mouth as he was sent soaring back to smash into a tree. Han got to his feet, charging with all the speed he had and punched with all his might. Sasuke's hand reached out and caught the blow. Han's eyes went wide. What? When the Uchiha looked up, green eyes were staring back at him, the hair shifting to pink, the dark clothes becoming form-fitting armor. Harino. Genjutsu. But when Sakura's fist gripped his hand like iron, the metal of his gauntlet, groaning and buckling around his knuckles before she shoved herself forward onto one knee and drove a hand wreathed in blue straight into his chest. Han felt his insides bleed. Now Sasuke! From shadow and mist, the Uchiha appeared, sword in hand. And then they were cutting him. Sakura on one side, Sasuke on the other, chakra scalpel and cold steel. Slicing, cutting, bleeding him. Han felt his strength rapidly leaving, and though he tried to fight and strike back with his steam-shrouded arm, and let more steam explode from his body to try and repel them, the Harino healed through it. The Uchiha moved too fast to burn. He felt his strength ebbing, literally bleeding out of him. Blood pooled in his mask, suffocating him. The weight of his armor bore down on his shoulders and chest, dragging him down to his knees. Slicing, cutting, carving. His blood hissed as it touched the cold ground, the bark of trees and blades of grass turned as scarlet as his armor. His knees began to shake, his breathing grew ragged and difficult. He was going to die here. Not to a Jinchuriki, or even to the Uzumaki, but to worthless, inconsequential humans. His name added to their laurels. His corpse paraded through Konoha like a prize. No. No! His mind pulled away, receding like a shoreline, retreating to usher in the tide. The Gobi answered. As Ryuko found herself cursing the mud dragon, being driven back further and further by the beast that just reformed, even as she tried to cut it to pieces, she kept some of her awareness focused on the IWA princess, so it didn't take her long to notice what the woman was doing. Between her own prodigious fire affinity and the wind blasts Ryuko was using to fend off the mud dragon, it did not take this segment of forest long to be wreathed in flames. Finally the mud dragon beast dried up, crumbling away to nothing, and Ryuko realized that Kuratsuchi had simply cut off its chakra. The liquid mud sloughing off of its stone and dirt insides, if not drying and cracking in the oven like heat of the flames. The flames. Fire, smoke, ash and soot, they stunned her eyes, and the wind specialist snarled as she realized she had no way to calm the ravaging fires. The princess now had all the fucking cover she needed. She lingered at the edge of the blaze, warring with indecision. Her mind knew it was a mistake to chase her into the fires. Her pride, however, rankled. The bitch had gotten the better of her again. There was a sound, and Ryuko whirled, rounding on the noise, only to blink in surprise. Sasuke? But no, something was different. She'd known Sasuke for years. Never had he ever looked so cold. Come dash, he demanded. We're going to need your wind element. The kunoichi raised her blade, pointing it at the Uchiha, who looked at the weapon, then raised an eyebrow that couldn't be less impressed if he tried. You're not Sasuke. Sasuke scoffed. I don't have time for this. Your teammate is injured and Sakura and I are trying to deal with the Jinchuriki. We're going to need wind soon. If you're going to help, help. Then, with nothing more to be said, the clone, or what she thought was a clone, vanished in a wet puddle. It was no exaggeration for Sasuke to say the explosion of steam nearly killed him. Without his speed, without Sakura throwing up earth walls to defend the both of them, without his mind bubbling up ways and methods to heal the burns that covered his right side, Sasuke had little doubt he would, at best, be out of the fight, at worst dead. The steam loomed over them like a mountain of bone white, blotting out the sun, blanketing the forest. The heat, even on the forest ground level, was oppressive. Breathing was getting harder. In a few minutes he wouldn't discount damage to his lungs. Well, you wanted more heat. He recognized her voice. More than that, he recognized pain in it. Turning his gaze leftward, he found Sakura. Her arm and leg were burned badly, the skin blistered and red. The pain was obvious on her face, as was the chakra exhaustion beginning to creep up on her, as she used her remaining arm to try and heal the damage. You don't have your seal, he commented. How are your reserves? She smiled, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. She has more than I ever did, but I'm running low. The steam began to take shape now. He could just see the silhouette of tails beginning to curl through the air. She followed his gaze. It would have been easier to get him before he transformed. We tried. He shrugged. No use complaining. I take it you have a plan to deal with it then? He nodded. Kyofu hissed, using her arm to shift where she sat, half leaning, half sitting against the trunk of a tree. She'd run. She wasn't proud of it, but she wasn't an idiot. Even at full strength, fighting Han was a daunting prospect. Staying would only give the ruthless IWA Nin another avenue to attack, a hostage to use. So yes, as soon as Sakura had gone in and apparently, somehow found the strength to, quite literally brawl with arguably the physically strongest being on the planet in a fist fight, Kyofu had turned and booked it. She'd collapsed after who knew how many yards. The adrenaline faded quickly, and from there the pain set in, her broken ribs, her damaged arm and leg. Soon enough her run had turned into a limping hobble, and that hobble now had her sitting by a tree. She could still hear the battle going. It was north of her, and now somewhat distant, but unmistakable. Trees crashing, explosions, a cloud of steam rising to blanket the forest in a haze of bone white, the discharge of chakra, even the rumbling of storm clouds and the faint crackle of electricity in the air. The western side of the forest was lit ablaze, judging by the tower of black smoke now rising into the sky. That's where Ryoko had gone off to fight against the IWA Kunoichi. She hissed, adjusting her seat, eyes scrunched up in pain, teeth grit. Maybe she could go back, should go back? Sasuke was fighting with Sakura, or at least she assumed so. The Uchiha could fix her up, help her get back in the fight, then it'd be at least 3 of them against Han. But that would mean leaving Sakura alone against that monster for too long. Despite whatever freakish shows of strength the girl had pulled off, that was not a fight she'd bank money on Sakura being able to win or survive. No. No. Frustration aside, her retreating was the right call. Where were the others? Lee? Hinata? Tenten? Had their fights ended? Were they still going on? Had they died or been injured? Could any of them help? Her good hand reached down, touching the forest floor, fingers splayed as she forced chakra to mold through her tenketsu, forced herself to focus through the pain. Kuchios. The spiders that emerged into being were small things, about the size of small beads, but there were many of them, well over 200 crawling along her fingers. Find the other slash, she demanded through pained breaths. If any of them can fight, bring them here, and, if you find Naruto, tell me immediately. No matter what, Naruto, the Mokutan was still the primary goal, the primary objective, everything, even she, was secondary to that. If they found him, even if she had to chew out her insides to do it, she would summon something to carry him from the field and back to Konoha. Go! The little creatures scuttled away, faster than they had any right to be. In seconds they'd vanished, disappearing into the undergrowth, thin strands of spun silk catching in the light being the only indication of their passing. She sat there for a while longer, focusing on her breathing, trying to track the fights by the sounds and what little she could see. Finally, after, she wasn't sure, there was a sound and it made her tense, drawing a kunai for what little good it would do her if it were a threat. Fuck, you look like hell! The tension bled out of her. Ryoko came into her line of sight, holding up a lone figure with one of Kyofu's spiders sitting over it. Kuratsuchi? Ryoko's face was all the answer she needed, even before she spat out her words. The bitch escaped. Kyofu shook her head. Another problem, but for now. Sakura and Sasuke need help. She breathed, gasped really as her broken rib made itself known again. Ryoko looked grim. Yeah. Sasuke found me, said he needed wind soon. Know what the fuck that means? Kyofu shook her head. No idea, he must be planning something. Not sure if it was him, Ryoko suddenly said. The Uchiha may have a stick up his ass, but he's never looked at me like some shit he scraped off his boot before. That made the summoner raise an eyebrow. Something was off about Sakura too, she admitted after a moment's hesitation. But right now, Han is the problem. Whatever's up with those two, we can deal with later. Ryoko didn't look happy, but she didn't protest either. After a moment, the wind user looked around. You gonna be okay here? That IWA bitch might be skulking around somewhere. Before anything more can be said, there's a sudden massive blast, a wave of heat that simply washes over them, a backdraft of steam nearly bowling them over, blanketing the whole of the forest. The both of them whirl around, and look to the sky as a pillar of white boiling steam rises into the sky and begins to take shape. Then they feel the pressure of that chakra bearing down on them. It's heavy, suffocating, all-encompassing and blinding. They can feel nothing but that overwhelming presence, and there's no doubt what exactly this was. Bijou. Go. Kyofu grunted. We don't have time for you to start fussing now of all times. Deal with the fight, then come back. She hesitated, looking conflicted for a moment before she gave a single, firm nod, then turned and bolted, as though fleeing before she could think better of the choice. It had been a long time since the chains had been loosened from around its tightly coiled neck. It could feel its limbs, feel the wind, the charge of a gathering storm. Its presence was fleeting, transigent. It could already feel its jailer tugging on the leash, regaining purchase over his mind. A moment of laxity, of desperation had ushered in his freedom, nothing more. Even so, it relished the few moments it would have to wander free again, and so made an effort to hold back the iron yoke that was Han's will for now. It could sense the lesser creatures below, small insects, like ants crawling through the forest floor. The ones its jailer had been fighting. Its sight came into being, granting it vision over the world and those very same creatures. Once more it felt Han battering at his cage, growing more insistent, more coherent, demanding control once more. It would not fight the jailer's battles for him, and it wished to enjoy these moments of freedom as long as it could extend them. It began to take to the sky. It had been too long since it had flown. He's running away? Sakura's voice held naked surprise. Sasuke was surprised too, he just did a better job of hiding it. Jinchuriki didn't normally escalate to the point of summoning their bijou merely to flee. Bijou were prideful after all. There's a rustle of leaves and suddenly, the wind Kunoichi, Ryoko, is bursting through the fog-drenched forest, grunting as her feet hit the ground. Alright, where the fuck do you need me, Uchiha? I need wind, more fucking specific. He pointed skyward. Blast as much steam and heat into the clouds as you can. The more you do, the easier this will be. The easier what will be? She asked, but regardless, unhooked her custom Fuma shuriken from her back and began to spin it like a fan. He began to move. He felt a hand wrap around his wrist. What are you doing? He turned, raising an incredulous eyebrow to meet Sakura's wide-eyed surprise. He can return, or worse, call for backup and then return. He answered. We're in no condition to fight him with backup. She grimaced, then nodded. I know what you're planning. In this body you only have one shot. Then I'd better make it count. He answered simply. Pulling his hand free from her grasp, Sasuke leapt up to the tops of the trees. The bijou soared into the sky, galloping like a horse, its 5 tails trailing behind it, forming a trail of steam clouds. It circled over them, seemingly deciding where to go, and Sasuke was grateful for the momentary delay. He reached the very tops of the trees and with a single mighty leap, rose high into the air, forming hand seals as he rose. He rose high enough to be noticed. The bijou turned its head, its long neck craning around to peer at him in curiosity, very much like an animal noticing another it had no reason to be threatened by. That made it all the easier. He slammed his hands together in the final seal. Chakra was leached from his body, leaving him breathless and instantly numb. Even in his old body, this was not a technique he could do more than once. In this one, so utterly unused to its use, or even channeling this much chakra at once, it was crippling. The edges of his vision darkened as he nearly passed out. Regardless, the clouds rapidly darkened into a storm, lightning crackling through the heavens as he muttered the words. Kirin. Like the wrath of God descending from above, the technique that had once been called the wrath of heaven bore down on its target. The great bijou had a moment to realize the danger, but little else. The lightning struck, and it was world-ending. Fucking hell! Ryoko's scream was nearly swallowed by the screaming of reality around them. The blast uprooted trees, tore chunks of the ground, lightning bolts crackled and struck the world around them as the world grew dark and the skies roiled with charged lightning. Sakura had seen the Kirin technique before, by far the most destructive ability in Sasuke's arsenal that did not involve the Sharingan, and even that was arguable. Even so, it had lost none of its awe-inspiring might, even to her. The Gobi writhed and moaned in the sky like a dying animal, lightning dancing through the whole of its body, breaking it apart, running through each individual water molecule until the beast broke apart and vanished like smoke in the wind. She peered upwards, where Sasuke had vanished, and saw him as he descended to the world again. Something was wrong. Her suspicion was confirmed when, rather than landing gracefully atop the trees, he slammed into the branch of a tree, bouncing off the limb to slam into another and another. She began to move, rushing to try and catch him, but Ryoko was faster, tossing a single, wind-powered kunai that drilled straight through the trees between BR and Sasuke before pinning the shoulder of his cloak into a tree trunk, arresting his fall long enough for Sakura to reach him. When she got him to the ground, his eyes were half open, one of them bloodshot, his breathing shallow, and one arm was badly broken where it had been introduced to a tree branch more stubborn than he was. "Your body isn't acclimatized to your bullshit," she hissed in his ear in reprimand. "HN," he grunted, closing his eyes. "It worked, didn't it?" The pink-haired girl cursed him under her breath even as her hands began glowing green, healing him. She worked quickly, but methodically, with a familiarity her body rebelled against, reminding her that this should not be as her fingertips grew numb and tingly. Suddenly, there was a much more immediate reminder in the form of a knife to her throat. Sakura tensed, Sasuke's eyes opening. "Who the hell are you two?" Sakura's seafoam eyes trailed up, tilting her head just enough to peer at Ryoko behind her, the silver-haired kunoichi staring at her with a cold gaze that told her she should choose her next words very carefully. "Ryoko." She swallowed, knowing and yet not this girl's name. "It's sus." "Bullshit. You never learned healing techniques. You hate healing techniques. And no way this uptight little shit learned, whatever that was in secret, even if he wasn't looking at me like a fucking stranger." She shifted her hold on the weapon, pressing it just a bit tighter against Sakura's throat. "So I'm gonna ask one more time. Who the fuck are you?" Sakura let out a sound, half in frustration, half a whimper at the feeling of the knife pressed so close to her jugular. "I've got her." She opened her eyes, trailing them down to Sasuke, whose onyx black eyes were fixed on Ryoko's. "Move." She didn't need to be told twice. Darting out from under Ryoko, she yanked the weapon out of her hand and then held it to her throat a second before she broke through the genjutsu, naked surprise flitting through her features. "Shit. Ryoko," she said, rolling the name over her tongue. "Listen. I know, things are very confusing right now, but I promise, we're not imposters, dash." She winced at how unsure her voice sounded. She'd never been the best liar, and this situation was unique. "I promise, we'll be back to normal soon, but for now you just need to trust us a bit, okay?" The silver-haired girl's teeth were grinding so hard Sakura was almost sure she could hear them. Before anything more could be said, there was a crash, making all three of them start. Turning sharply, Sakura could be forgiven for gaping like a gasping fish at the sight in front of her. Han, half burned to the point of his skin charred black, armor shattered, half falling off of him. He looked half dead, to put it kindly. But still he was standing. Still he was healing. "You gotta be kidding," Ryoko breathed. "The fuck does it take?" Sasuke groaned, moving to try and get to his feet. He made it to one knee. Sakura released Ryoko, taking a stance, placing herself between the Jinchuriki and the other two as she heard Ryoko draw her Fuma Shuriken from her back again. She was running low on chakra tool, though she was certainly in better shape than the Jinchuriki. If she pressed him, she might be able to win outright. If it came down to attrition, she would lose. She was losing. The Jinchuriki glared at them with one eye half melted in its socket, the other bloodshot and wide in insane rage. He stumbled forward, lumbering like a wrathful giant. She was fairly sure rational thought was somewhat beyond him after this much damage. Mere instinct was driving him more than anything else. Sasuke breathed beside her, his shoulders sagging. "I've got him." "You can barely stand, you ain't got shit," Ryoko barked. But Sakura knew the statement for what it meant and was about to charge, capitalize on the opening when Sasuke's hand whipped out, grabbing her by the wrist, pulling her back. "I've got him," he repeated. She blinked, staring at her teammate in askance while there was a sound, sudden, wet and squelching. She recognized it, the sound of steel cutting through flesh. When she turned again she saw Han, yes. But now there was the tip of a sword sticking out the front of his throat. And grasping that sword, Kuratsuchi. The IWA princess panted, her ragged breathing sounding little better than a death rattle as she dug in the blade. Han stiffened, jerked, his chest jumping as he tried to suck down a breath that would not come with a blade severing his windpipe. "He can't regenerate as long as the sword stays there," Sasuke breathed. Kuratsuchi didn't hear, but apparently, she was a quick study. Han grasped the weapon, trying to pull it free, but she dug it in harsher. The Jinchuriki jerked and twisted, trying to throw her off, but she held fast. Han gargled, bloody spit leaking from beneath his mask, blood pouring from his throat, drowning him in the scarlet liquid. Kuratsuchi screamed, kicking with all her strength at the back of Han's knee, forcing the dying monster down. Still, he tried to stand. Pressing down with all her weight, Kuratsuchi shoved the sword down to the base, the hand guard pressing to the back of the man's neck, and shoved down even further, until the tip dug into the dirt, impaling Han on the legendary sword. Still he struggled, still he tried and moved. It seemed to last an eternity. Finally, at long last, Han fell still. The monster of Iwa was dead. Kuratsuchi stumbled away from the corpse, not even having the strength to draw the blade. Sakura looked at her then, her eyes trailing away from Han. Her skin was pale. Deathly pale. Dark veins spread under paper-thin skin. Blood leaked from her eyes and mouth. Kuratsuchi looked at her with glassy eyes. Then with a horrid wet cough, the Iwa princess fell to one knee as Sakura started forward. She didn't make half the distance before the woman collapsed, struggling to breathe as she vomited black-tinged blood. Chapter 89. My lady. The voice startled Akane, making her jerk from the light doze she hadn't even realized she'd been sinking into. On her lap, Sasami sniffed, curling in on herself at the voice of the Umbu that was now hovering at the threshold of the makeshift medical station. Akane blinked away the lingering touch of sleep, eyes panning over to the still deathly pale and unmoving Yugago beside them. My lady. The Umbu called again, before taking a knee in a formal bow. Hokage-sama requests your presence. For a moment she wondered at the man's formality, then her mind caught up with the reality she'd forgotten came back to her. Akane. Akane was the Lady of Fire. The daimyo. Right. The young girl's answer was very nearly mumbled, almost inaudible. I will not leave, she says, sniffing through the tears still lingering beneath the surface. The Hokage can come here. The Umbu shifted where he knelt, and even Akane could see the man's surprise. His head moved, the mask going from the young girl at Akane's lap to the injured Yugago. I'm afraid it's a matter regarding the safety of the village, her safety as well, the man added hastily. It is urgent, my lady. The manipulation was blatant, but it was effective. She felt Sasami shift, watched as the indecision bloomed behind the girl's eyes as she warred between answering the call and staying by Yugago's side. The Umbu noticed too. I will stay with her, he declared. Should her condition change, I will immediately inform you, my lady. He bowed his head, and there were a few more moments of silence before finally, Sasami sat up. She lingered in her seat, head hanging low before the little girl that seemed too small stood. Where is the Hokage now? Third floor of the hospital, my lady. You will be escorted the moment you arrive. Quietly, almost despondently, the dark-haired child started moving. Akane suddenly stood. Sasami paused, turning to look over her shoulder quizzically. The Jinchuriki shifted uncomfortably from one foot to the other, suddenly unsure of herself. It's just. The girl looked so lonely it was heartbreaking. The Jinchuriki put on a smile that she knew looked brittle on her face. Want me to come with? The small, somber girl stared at her. Then she nodded. Akane stepped forward, her hand reaching down. Hesitantly, Sasami reached up, fingers grasping Akane's firmly as they walked away and towards the hospital. She woke with fire down her lungs. She thrashed, her limbs flailed. Distantly, faintly, she heard a voice, demanding, screaming, hold her down. Then she felt hands clasped around her arms, pressing, holding her down, pinning her limbs in place as her insides burned, as acid surged up her throat and she vomited. She thrashed and writhed. Shadows danced across her eyes as she felt every muscle going rigid and taut, her whole body heaving, nearly throwing off whatever or whoever was on top of her. Hold her down! Someone screamed again. The pain ripped and tore and burned and sliced and seared through her. She felt herself scream until her voice gave out, felt her muscles bunch and tense until they tore. Finally, after a moment, or eternity, it was over. She breathed harshly, wheezing, her eyes fluttered open, glazed and blurred. The late sun beat down over her brow, blinding her. She could see it, shining overhead through the clouds. Spears of light and red fire. A flash of pink, someone hovering over her. Kuratsuchi? The voice sounded like it was underwater, and she needed it repeated before she understood fully, and had to strain to listen to the others speaking before her ears seemed to remember how to fulfill their function. Hi, bother! I wasn't about to let her die. In case you didn't get the memo while you two were taking bullshit drugs or whatever you're on, she's one of our enemies in this war. Enough! Kuratsuchi allowed herself to focus, for a time, on breathing. She felt the numbness receding from her extremities. Pins and needles spread across her skin as her sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch returned to her. Finally, she was able to see fully once again through her fluttering eyes. She recognized Ryoko quickly enough. The silver-haired kunoichi stood over her with a scowl that told the IWA princess exactly what she thought of the fact that Kuratsuchi was still breathing. The other two she knew by reputation rather than introductions. Sakura Haruno and Sasuke Uchiha. Naruto's students. I'm alive! She was surprised. Her last clear thought had been the poison burning through her, the pain nearly crippling as she snuck up behind Han, willing the weakness to hold off until she could deliver the final killing blow. She heard her own voice, realizing she spoke aloud. Easy, Sakura said, kneeling at her side. Sasori hit you with one of his custom toxins. Whatever he'd hit her with, she felt like she'd been run over by a half-dozen cargo wagons. Her eyes trailed towards the three of them. Just kill me, she whispered after a moment. I won't be paraded through Konoha for an execution or as a trophy. At least spare her that final indignity if nothing else. But at her words Sakura looked genuinely startled. It was the Uchiha who spoke. We're not killing you or parading you, he muttered simply. Naruto, he drawled. You took him, didn't you? Hit him? Why the hell would she do that? Ryoko questioned. Only thing that makes sense. The black-haired ninja shrugged. We were far behind them, with wounded to heal. Even if Lee would have sprinted after them, these were S-class ninja. We shouldn't have been able to catch up. But suddenly they're delayed. And when we catch them, they're all split up across the forest, spread out. Searching for something. He jerked his head towards her. Then she kills Han. All of the other S-class threats are dead and none of us can still find Naruto. It's guesswork, but unless you have a better guess dash. Ryoko's lip curled. Kuratsuchi closed her eyes, letting her head fall back to rest on the warm grass. The bingo books said you were smart? Where is he then? Sakura asked. For a moment, Kuratsuchi considered keeping her silence. It was a reflex rather than thought, as she lay there still collecting herself. Then she remembered. She'd been trying to deliver him to Konoha again anyway. This had been her goal. But she had to make sure of something. Or try to. Let me go, she said. She opened her eyes, pink trailing over onyx black and seafoam green. She didn't bother looking at Ryoko. She wouldn't listen. On cue, the red-eyed kunoichi bit out her next words. Not a chance in fucking hell. She forced herself to sit up, even as her muscles screamed and her bones felt like they were splintering. The pain gnawed at her, but she could be in pain later. Sasuke spoke over Ryoko's protests, though curiously, staring at Sakura. We don't have a lot of time. I don't give a shit, Ryoko growled. Charity is the only reason she's alive and her execution is long overdue by anyone's standards. Despite herself, Kuratsuchi felt herself laugh, even as the action forced more pain to bite through her side and spread thorns through her lungs. Now wasn't that the fucking truth? Regardless. Let me go, she repeated, now getting to her knees. You're right. You don't have a lot of time. She swallowed down a mouthful of nails and acid. With this much chakra, this much power, and Han releasing the Gobi, more IWA Nin must be on their way. They'd have sensed it if not been close enough to see it. So unless you want to fight half the IWA Guard in this forest looking for him, let me go. I'll tell you exactly where I hid him. Even if we say yes. Sakura interjected in a tone that seemed genuinely gentle. You're in no condition to get far. I got rid of most of the poison, but some traces are still in your blood and complications. Without a proper medical check you can still die, especially if you don't rest. Hadn't Uchiha been the medic? Or was she misremembering? Regardless, she chuckled. Walking away and dying a little ways off sounded fine to her. I won't be taken, she hissed, to be dissected on some slab for my bloodline, for my head to be delivered to Kuto's household for a job well done. If I die dash. She shrugged. Fuck it. At least I'll be in control of one fucking thing before I go. For some reason, Haruna looked genuinely sad as she looked at her. Very well. Bullshit. She's right, the Gobi and my Kirin technique must have attracted attention. Sasuke justified. It would have been seen for miles at the absolute least. Which means that yes, every IWA Nin in the vicinity likely sent people this way to figure out what the hell happened. He justified, not even bothering to look at the protesting Ryoko. We have very little time to argue with her. So she just walks the fuck away? After everything? Just like that? The woman screamed, fury making her skin flush. Sasuke, for his part, didn't flinch. Yes. Naruto is frankly more important. At that, the kunoichi didn't protest. Sasuke turned his gaze back to Kuratsuchi. You have my word. You'll be able to walk away. Now. Dash. He blinked. Tell. Me. There was something there, a thread of chakra, a compulsion slithering into the back of her mind like a worm, insidious and uncomfortable. The words were pried out of her. 300 meters or so. She gasped. South by southeast of here. In the hollow of a dead tree. I tied one of the ropes from the sword sheath at its base. Bright red. Sasuke nodded, and with a sharp turn on his heel, began marching south by southeast. You're just gonna take her word for it. Ryoko shouted after him. She's not lying, he called. Even if I couldn't tell, few use their last words to breathe falsehoods. He answered without looking back. Sakura stared after him, before turning her gaze to Kuratsuchi. Kuro, let me help. I don't need your fucking help. She wheezed even as she swallowed back the taste of copper and metal. She forced one leg to move. Then the other, shambling towards the fallen Han and Kuta's sword. With a trembling hand she reached towards it. She felt a blade against her throat. She went still. That sword ain't yours, bitch. Ryoko's words echoed through her skull once again, the words she'd said, what felt like a lifetime ago. Sakura slowly reached her feet. Ryuk fucking Uchiha said she could walk away. Ryoko growled. Nobody ever said shit about her taking that fucking sword. Kuratsuchi huffed a breath, like someone had socked her in the gut, or she didn't have the breath to laugh. She wasn't sure which. Ryoko's grip tightened over the kunai, red eyes narrowed. Go ahead. The woman hissed. Just give me a fucking reason. It was Kuta's sword. Her sword. The last threadbare link to anything. With a resigned, silent despondency she felt the last bit of something inside of her crack. She didn't cry. She wouldn't give the bitch the satisfaction. Slowly, her trembling fingers pulled back, hand falling limply by her side. She looked at the blade, the dark red hilt, its obsidian blade dripping with Han's blood. It was there, barely a few steps away, and yet so far. She stared at the blade, eyes hollow and her insides suddenly cold in a way that had nothing to do with the pain or the poison. She'd already lost everything. What's one more piece of her to add to the pyre? Without another word, with the little dignity she had left, she turned and walked away. She never looked back as she vanished into the trees. When they arrived at the hospital, as the Umbu predicted, both of them were escorted by other Umbu. If the outside of the hospital was filled with injured, the halls of the hospital itself were even worse. Lined on both sides with bleeding, groaning men and women, some on beds, most on cots, with parts of the structure having collapsed, it looked more like a ruin than the hospital she remembered. Nurses, volunteers, doctors, everyone moved in a chaotic mess of noise and rushing hurry. Their eyes bloodshot, their cheeks gaunt, Akane wondered if some of them were on drugs to keep them going. Her mother had told her stories about how medics had needed to operate during the worst of the war. She never thought she'd see those stories come to life with her own eyes, though. Even through this chaos, people parted like schools of fish before a predator as the Umbu passed, quickly pressing themselves to walls or sliding out of the way as much as they could to make way. It wasn't long before they made it to the room. The only thing that marked it as the Hokage's room was the lone guard posted outside. The guard caught sight of them, offering a single nod to his colleagues before bowing slightly towards Akane and opening the door. They entered quietly. Kakashi-sama was sitting on his hospital bed, papers and reports in hand, single visible eye looking over them before he turned that eye onto them, and smiled beneath his mask. Lady Sasami, Akane-chan. It's good to see you both safe. Akane floundered for a moment. While the Hokage had never been cruel, either could she say they were close, and given the nature of their last meeting and everything that had happened since then, the somewhat cheerful tone caught her off guard. Sasami, on the other hand, took his voice and words in stride, straightening her spine and clasping her hands in front of her in a gesture of courtly poise that made Akane's obliviousness to her identity seem painfully obtuse in retrospect. You wish to see me, Hokage-dano? Kakashi nodded, the lightness in his eye melting away. It seemed he was willing to cut to the chase too. The Raikage and his men are camped outside our walls. That made Akane shift with unease. She'd heard rumors, but to have it confirmed that they were still here. Are they preparing for another attack? Sasami tried to keep her voice even, but the light trembled and it betrayed her fear. Kakashi settled the pages in hand on a nearby night table, giving them his full attention. I don't believe they're going to attack again, not tonight. His eye trailed towards Akane. They suffered a considerable blow, and with the Kazekage here providing backup, their position is much more tenuous. I see, the young girl said, but offered nothing more. Kakashi eyed her, offering a smile that seemed almost pitying. More likely than not, tomorrow they will try to negotiate. I of course will attend, as will the Kazekage. You wish for me to attend as well? Sasami, it seemed, was much faster on the uptake than she herself was. Kakashi nodded, and Akane had to fight the urge to shift nervously from foot to foot. The attack bloodied us, the man said. It was repelled but barely, and while the Kazekage has shown little interest in taking advantage of that situation, the delegation from Kiri that is supposedly approaching cannot be counted on to share his cooperative nature. Your presence, under guard and participating, even if nominally in the negotiations, will show other villages that we haven't been cowed by the events today. Portray strength where you're weak and show weakness where you are strong. The younger girl quotes, drawing Akane's curious eye. Kakashi nodded. Your father's writings? Yes. The young Jinchuriki couldn't keep her silence anymore. But Hokage-sama. They came here for Sasami, you said so yourself? What's to stop them from trying again when we take her outside the walls? As I said, she will be under guard, he said. I myself will be present, 2 full squads of my Umbu guard, for her and for myself, the Kazekage, and of course you. Akane tried not to flinch. She wasn't sure she succeeded. Seeing her hesitation, Kakashi decided to press the point. You slew their Jinchuriki. It's likely for that reason alone they're still here to negotiate at all. They want her back. At the moment the most dangerous force on the battlefield is the Raikage, eh? But even he can't fight you, the Kazekage, and myself all at once. He paused, then trailed his eye again to Sasami. All of this, of course, is predicated on your acquiescence, my lady. The young girl's head bowed. Before she knew what she was doing, Akane stepped forward. She doesn't have to. Kakashi's eyes turned towards her again, raising a slender eyebrow. The Jinchuriki felt her tongue turn to cotton in her mouth, her throat close up before forcing herself to speak through it. It's too dangerous, even with all of us there there's no way we could guarantee her safety. No. There is no guarantee. He admitted candidly. But if we don't, we risk prolonging the war. A country without at least the appearance of a strong daimyo, the appearance of a strong village, is a weak one. Image is part of combat in this theater. It'll be worse if we lose her. Akane protested. He nodded. You're right. But appearances isn't the only reason. Then what's the other? Any agreement made between us without the seal of at least a daimyo, we're hidden villages. He drawled. Technically, the Kumo daimyo could simply not acknowledge the treaty and renew hostilities. But with her as a participant, even a nominal one, that politically becomes much more difficult. Other daimyo would not like to believe the treaties they put their name to can be ignored after all. But I'll go. Sasami's voice brought her up short, turning her gaze over to see the girl, trembling, fists clenched, but jaw set and eyes fixed with determination. I'll go, she repeated. Silence reigned. Akane's decision from there was easy. She straightened. Then I would like to have the position of her guard, Hokage-sama. Kakashi's eyes switched between them. You already were, he said. I mean officially. She pressed, demanded. I want her to be my mission above everything. The other Umbu, the village, even you. His eyebrow hiked a little higher over his head. After a moment he chuffed a barely their laugh shifting where he sat. Very well then, he said slowly. Consider it official then, Lady Senju. Your objective will be the protection of the Lady Sasami above all others. He offered her a thin, humorless smirk. Which, if I'm not mistaken, makes you a fire guardian. For Naruto it was a strange feeling, waking to the sensation of light, repeated slaps on his cheek. We follow you all this way and you're asleep? He hears a familiar voice tease. Opening his eyes is a struggle, but he manages, and he's rewarded with a vision of green. Green healing chakra, and green eyes. He blinks, staring up. Sakura? She smiles, and for a moment, it's different, the hair shorter, the mess of scar tissue over her eyes gone, the armor and weapons replaced by a healer's tunic. The vision passes. And she's back, she's normal. But Sakura's eyes glimmer with unshed tears as she looks at him. Hey, you idiot. He blinks, staring, eyes trailing down to her hands which still glow with the faint traces of healing energies. He turns his gaze to Sasuke. Stoic, grim-faced and coldly distant, it's a face that's strange and familiar and wrong on this one that he's known for so long this time. Guess you're as weirded out as I am. The voice makes him turn away, finding Ryuko nearby, arms crossed, staring at both Sakura and Sasuke as though she was trying to decide what exactly she was looking at. Naruto blinks and turns to look at Sakura. She looked at him with a patient sort of kindness that was alien on both versions of her. Seeing him at a loss for words, she's the one who speaks, the one who breaks the silence. We could never leave you alone. She smirked. You get into too much trouble, and we'd be worse than trash, wouldn't we? His heart stuttered in his chest. He sags, the breath wheezing out of him as he strangles down a choked sob or a choked laugh. She smiles quietly, with a look that tells him, no. He's not crazy. He lurches forward, almost pitching before he caught himself, staring into her eyes. How? Sasuke can probably explain it better than I dash. Her sentence was cut off as she had the wind knocked out of her by the sudden, fierce hug she was crushed into. Naruto wasn't sure when he started crying. Sakura laughed, hugging him back and planting a tender kiss on his cheek. After a moment she moved to stand, dragging him up as his legs found their strength again. He looked to Sasuke. The Uchiha stared back at him with a raised eyebrow and his lip curling almost into a sneer. Silence. I ain't giving you a kiss dash. Just like Sakura, his words were stopped as Naruto hugged him too with an audible oomph. Stiff and awkward, Sasuke patted him on the back. Ryuko threw her hands up in the air. Fucking great, you're all nuts. Naruto ignored her, pulling away and grasping both Sasuke and Sakura by the shoulders. You guys. He gasped. I mean, how are you dash, Kurama? Sasuke's voice cut in like a knife. Naruto turned to him, and the Uchiha continued. Kurama did this. He said. Time is. He pauses, seemingly measuring the words, different where we were. Meaningless. An instant or an eternity, he found and dragged the pieces back together. Naruto turned from him to Sakura, who nodded quietly. The blonde blinked, brain turning, churning, trying to wrap his head around it. Kurama had done this. Kurama was still alive. He reached into his seal. Hollow. Empty. He's not here. He whispered, looking to them. He didn't come back with you. No, he wouldn't be. Sasuke shrugged as if that answered anything. Then Sakura spoke. And we're not back. Not really. She whispered, almost apologetic as she looked at him. We're here for a window, a moment. This isn't even us, strictly speaking. We're whispers. He shook his head. No. No, your dash, remnants. Sasuke cut him off with callous finality. The look on Naruto's face must have been something, because even the Uchiha softened his hard-line gaze as he sighed. Look, this is when Kurama decided we should come. It sucks, I get it. But stay focused. Kurama decided? The fox was smart, and he wasn't cruel. He would have had a reason. A good one. He has to trust that at least. Why? He choked. They were here. They were right here. The thought of losing them again, it was just cruelty in a different form. Because you're not alone. Sasuke's answer was cryptic. When Sakura spoke up to explain, it sent ice through Naruto's veins. He followed us, Naruto. She whispered. Tobi. He followed us through the seal. What the hell are you talking about? Tsunade's voice was shrill, angry even as Orochimaru shifted uncomfortably beside her. He loved you. The waters churned and hissed, the sounds coalescing into a haunting approximation of a voice. But you loved another. So he attempted to leave. Bullshit. She barked back, stepping once more to the defensive water wall. Nagato turned those strange ringed eyes of his towards Orochimaru. The waters hissed. Is it? For once, the serpent felt tongue-tied, an apple lodged at the back of his throat, choking him. Tsunade stepped in front of him, staring into his eyes. Is it? She demanded, the edge of creeping horror sneaking into her voice as she looked at his face. He was not one for melodrama, but seeing her where she stood now, demanding an answer, he found it impossible to lie to her. When he said the words, he almost coughed them out, lodged as they were in his voice box. It's true. She sagged, stumbling back a single step like he'd struck her. He didn't resent you. he said in a poor imitation of being comforting. He didn't hate you. He simply couldn't be around you both. Even so, she didn't look to have been put at ease. Her eyes trailed, searching, looking at nothing as she was caught in the grips of memory. He had to wonder. Was she thinking back on the things she hadn't seen? On the signs she'd missed? The pain that Jiraiya had so expertly hidden that even he had barely seen it in time? Orochimaru allowed her a moment, then, not knowing what else to do, he stepped around her, his touch ghosting past her arm before he withdrew it, worried he would overstep. He stared at this emaciated creature called Nagato. "All right, say you knew him," he allowed. "Beyond sentimentality, we would still have no reason to spare you. She is still our target, and this war is still ongoing. The waters of the barrier world, thrumming with a rumble of power. The war is ongoing. But it does not have to be this way." The man breathed. "Spare her, and I will personally guarantee Amigakyo will fully withdraw from this conflict, as you said. Konan is the linchpin holding the Confederation together. Without her, it will fall apart again. Konoha will be safe, your mission fulfilled, and you will be free to divert your resources to fighting your true enemy, Iwabikure." The waters stilled, and silence reigned. "You've done enough, haven't you? I know you've poisoned our wells and food supplies." Orochimaru stiffened. "I know that Tsunade-san has made certain the disease will spread far before it's finally detected. Is even that not enough? Must there be more blood? More death?" "No, not much more. Just one. Leaving here on nothing but his word, with no collateral, no guarantee? They would never have another shot at Konan if they let her go now, and she decided to go back on her word." He's about to say such. But then, Tsunade speaks. What happened to him? Orochimaru closes his eyes, the question, burning at the back of his mind, now blazes, refusing to be ignored, to be shoved aside in favor of the mission, for the sake of practicality. It wasn't the time for this. Tsunade dash. He pleads. "I want to know," she demands, stepping to his side. We deserve to know. We thought he was dead. We'd searched for weeks." Liars. The voice wasn't Nagato's, it was Konan. Through blood-stained lips and barely open eyes, the kunoichi sneered at them, glowering where she lay across Nagato's root-lined lap. "We waited," he waited. "For weeks and months. Clinging to life, hoping to see you both one more time, none of you came. And when you did, you all decided it was better to have a dead martyr than a crippled reminder." Suddenly, Orochimaru felt his insides turn to ice. "The hell are you talking about?" He didn't recognize the voice at first. It took him a moment to realize it was his own. He steps forward, a fist slamming into the solid wall of still churning water. "I looked through those swamps," he hisses. "In the rain, in the mud, in the muck, with blood and bodies and remnants of battlefields. I looked. He wasn't there. He couldn't have been. He couldn't have been there." Nagato's hand fell over Konan's head. The waters danced. "Peace, Konan, rest for now." The woman struggled against the compulsion, her eyes fighting to stay open. But she was too weak, too injured, and after a moment of struggle, her eyes shut quietly. Nagato turned his eyes to them. "Perhaps you did look." The ripples in the water whispered. "I had not come into my powers then. I could not say, but if you did, we did not find you, even as we searched for you on his behalf." "How long dash?" Tsunade whispers. "How long did he survive?" "He lingered at the edge of death for nearly 1 year." Orochimaru felt the strength in his legs nearly abandon him. A year. 1 year. They'd searched for 3 months. Before duty, before practicality, before hopelessness had pulled them away. A year! He felt Tsunade's hand grip his shoulder, squeezing tightly. Nagato stared at them with those fathomless eyes. "He trained us in that time, as best he could. We learned how to mold chakra, how to remain hidden, techniques that would serve us well in the years to come. Even so," the young man bowed his head. "When he came for him, we could not save him." "Who?" Orochimaru asked, fingers clenching into fists. "Who came for him? He would rip the man's heart out himself." Nagato's ringed eyes blinked languidly. "He bore a Konoha headband. We could not recognize him. He slew Jiraiya. He slew Yahiko. It was Jiraiya that allowed us to escape." "Who?" the snake demanded. Nagato's head bowed. "The man in the spiral mask. The process was imperfect," Sasuke explained. He didn't study the seal as we did, didn't construct it or understand the various theories. He's trapped. Sakura said with a firm nod. Lost, doesn't know how to get out, the only window is Kurama. Naruto breathed, realization dawned on him. She nodded. He's been fighting. Sasuke whispered slowly. On 1,000 battles across 1,000,000 skeins of fate and time they've been fighting this whole time. Kurama's been keeping him contained, but occasionally, something breaks through. You must have noticed things. Sakura said. Differences, pieces that don't line up. Naruto felt cold. That's why. She continued. Whenever he escapes, it's like us, for brief windows, moments, and he tries to make things change for the worse, move things to favor chaos, or help him escape. More the latter than the former. Sasuke shrugged. Something happened. Maybe Kurama slipped, or he was busy, gathering us. But a shard, if you will, got out. A fairly strong one. It's been out and it's making its move. Kurama knew it would try to hit you now. If he can get to you, he might be able to use you to finally escape fully. Naruto felt his heart beating like a fist beneath his ribs. Suddenly, there's a sound of someone clapping. The three of them stiffened. Then, they could sense them. Covered behind a veil of genjutsu, they hadn't noticed. But the Umbu were here. A dozen at least, though that didn't discard the possibility of more still in hiding. And standing in the shadow of dying leaves. There he was. Unchanged, unmoved, exactly as Naruto remembered him. Tobi. Beside him, Naruto recognized her by the picture in the bingo books. That Tsuchikage with her dark raven hair, cold eyes and pale skin. The spiral mask stared back at them, hands lightly clapping in celebration. The fur ball was always sharp, wasn't he? He drawled. I'm impressed he was able to drag up the pieces of the two of you. Enough to make you conscious rather than gibbering lunatics too. Nice. Sasuke and Sakura took defensive positions beside him, Ryoko cursing as she drew her weapon. You know, princess. His silver-haired teammate said, taking her place at his back. When this is all over, you owe me one hell of a fucking explanation. Don't panic. Sasuke uttered. He's not fully here. He's not nearly as powerful as he was before, and his time is running dangerously low. He may not be able to fight at all. Focus on the Umbu and the Kage. Slowly the masked devil knelt. My. You were always sharp too, weren't you, Sasuke-kun? He trailed his gaze up to his side, towards the Tsuchikage. Though you'll find I have a few surprises of my own. The woman smiled, an expression that was malicious and cruel. She closed her eyes. When she opened them again, all 3 members of Team 7 gasped in horror. Spinning within the pupil was the 3-toed Sharingan eye mirroring the one now leering through the single eye hole of the spiral mask. Tobi laughed a dark, cruel laughter that cut through the dark forest as night fell around them. Chapter 91. The memories in Sasuke's mind were broken, fragmented. He, unlike Sakura, had not melded well with his counterpart in this world. Where Sakura slipped in as unobtrusively into her host as possible, sharing tactics and skills seamlessly to the point where conscious and subconscious actions were overridden and reasserted in an instant as the need arose, his experience was altogether different. He was a square block in a round hole, ill-fitting, obtrusive, obstructive, wrong. He functioned now by suppressing the will of his counterpart, shoving him down into the dark corners of the mind, not unlike a Jinchuriki to their Bija. It was a battle of wills, and for now, his will was stronger. Or perhaps more accurately, his counterpart was cooperative in a way he was not, and had chosen passivity over open conflict. Regardless, the end result was the same. For the moment, he was in control. But while he did not have the seamless melding of Sakura, he did have one thing he could draw on: his alternates' memories. Bits and pieces, slivers really, but between that and his own intelligence he knew enough to begin putting together the first vestiges of a plan as the IWA Umbu moved to tighten the noose around them, their weapons drawn and power roiling beneath their skin, like waters in a storm. The Tsuchikage moved forward, a slow, languid air in her steps. Red Sharingan eyes she should not have spinning with a quiet menace. I've been waiting for this for quite a long time, truth be told, the woman said quietly. Naruto snarled, grit teeth like the bared fangs of an animal backed into a corner. Keep your head, Sakura warned the blonde. She was right. They weren't strong enough to cover for any mistakes, not now. It seemed to work. While not calm, he felt Naruto relax ever so slightly. 8. Sakura counted the Umbu. There were 9, but the 9th was decent enough at genjutsu. He saw little need to correct her. He would deal with that one shortly. No need to tip his hand to the man. We can fight 8, but only if you can hold her and Toby off. Sakura continued. If you let them get in your head, then we're all in trouble. Naruto nodded, grabbing a tighter hold on the reins of his flaring anger, the coil of emotions wrapping tight around his temper in a degree of self-control that seemed almost alien to the Naruto Sasuke knew, who was all emotion and unrestrained passions. The blonde offered a quiet nod, then began moving his hands in the signs Sasuke vaguely recognized as the Kuchiyos. When Ma and Pa appeared on his shoulders, the two summons were both busying themselves, demanding explanations and fussing over his condition even as they carefully began the process of channeling nature chakra into his system to activate Sage mode. They were being careful. Sakura had healed him, but he was not at 100% by any stretch of the imagination, and his previous fight against so many S-class shinobi had drained his reserves significantly. And now, right in front of him, was Toby. Perhaps he should feel somewhat reassured that the bastard had tried to stack the deck this much. Goodness knows he wouldn't have needed to before. His eyes flickered to Toby. He was barely there. Naruto was staring right at him, sensing him, but it felt as though he was barely there, like lingering smoke, hanging in the air, ready to drift away and vanish at the next breeze. Kurama's fighting him has been fighting him this whole time. He's barely got any time left. The words bounced in his skull, making sense, and yet not. He could understand them, but they didn't feel real, not truly. He'd been here, waiting, preparing for the man for a lifetime, and now that he was here, he was just a shade. Something barely there? It didn't feel real. Unlike the Tsuchikage and Umbu surrounding him, the specter of a world long dead hadn't moved, hadn't readied himself for a fight, instead merely crouching on his tree branch like a ghoulish gargoyle, mirth dancing in his one visible eye. And then there was no more time to think, no more time to sit and force his brain to make sense of all this, to organize the whirlwind of truths and information that had been dropped onto his lap. The Umbu were the first to close in. Ryoko, Sasuke and Sakura met the charge in their own ways, wind blades, crackling lighting, and heaving earth rising, leaving Naruto to contend with the Tsuchikage. She attacked as well, lightning fast, almost too fast to see as his body lurched from base to the empowered Sage mode nearly too late. His hand rose, bone striking bone as forearm struck forearm, to stop a kunai from driving itself into his temple. She was strong, stronger than she had any right to be without something augmenting her. Her leg moved, hooking onto the back of his knee, and he needed to shift to avoid her tripping him outright. A Rasengan bloomed in his free hand as he turned his other hand to grasp at her wrist, holding her in place to drive the swirling sphere of energy into her ribs. Then, in a display fit for Orochimaru himself, the woman twisted. She turned, her seized arm going up, over her head and behind her back as if she just dislocated her shoulder and elbow, the leg that hadn't been interlocked with his own now rising to plant itself between the bend of his bicep and elbow, halting the Rasengan mid-thrust as her last free hand whipped around and nearly ripped open his throat with a crackling kunai blade wreathed in lightning. He released her, shoving her away and himself back, out of her reach, awkwardly jerking the Rasengan to smash into the lightning blade, deflecting it upwards as she extended the thing in an attempt to catch him on the retreat. Without missing a single step, the woman was on him again, pressing the attack. Naruto felt her chakra seep down into the earth, twisting and roiling the dirt before his own power rushed down, overpowering hers and seizing the rock, the mud, and the roots themselves. Her power was forced aside, washed out, and he noted the open surprise on her face, surprised that he could still overwhelm her technique, weakened as he was, but it was short-lived. Spears of stone, choking tendrils, and boggy muck rose to the surface, seeking her out, looking to trap her. She leapt into the air, and Naruto called a gale of wind to batter her down again, bringing her into reach of the vines that snaked and coiled around her body, his hand tightening as the roots crushed and strangled. "Behind, kid!" Pa shouted. The warning came and he listened, whirling to look behind. But Toby had always been too fast by half. His hand was where it needed to be, ready to intercept, to shove the attack aside, but it didn't matter. His hand passed through Toby's like it had so many times before, and he was able to see the red of the man's Sharingan eye a second before he felt the white-hot pain of a knife punching into his flesh, slipping and grinding between his ribs as the air in his lungs left him in a breathless gasp. He stumbled back, but another hand reached out, grabbing him by the throat, holding him still, and Naruto blinked, staring up into that spiral mask as the knife dug deeper into his side, leaving a burning trail of liquid fire spreading through his chest. Three tomos spun languidly behind Tobi's mask. Have you forgotten how to fight me after all this time? I'm disappointed, Naruto-kun. With a swirl of chakra, a Rasengan formed in his palm, thrusting forwards to grab the kunai. To make certain he grabbed hold of it. As expected, the Rasengan passed through the murderous monster without the slightest bit of damage inflicted, but the kunai was released, letting Naruto's fingers grab hold of the hilt as Tobi took slow steps backwards, secure in the cloak of invulnerability that had frustrated them all for so long. The kunai in Naruto's side jutted out like a gnarled root, dripping dark blood that squeezes its way out from the obstruction that was the blade itself as the Rasengan dissipated in the blonde's outstretched palm. Naruto breathed harshly, tasting copper at the back of his throat, feeling his breath wheezing and hoping his lung wasn't about to collapse. The Tsuchikage appeared, melting out of the ground beside Tobi, rubbing at her throat where the vines had been strangling her before the time-locked ninja's intervention. He's still dangerous, the masked Uchiha drawled. I trust you won't be underestimating him again. The woman stood to her full height, a spectacular sneer on her lips. Whether it was just for him or for herself, Naruto couldn't say, and he didn't care. Ma and Pa were fussing in his ears, shouting at each other, shouting at him, but he barely had a mind to listen to either of them. Sasuke, Sakura, Kurama. They'd all put all of their faith, everything they were, everything they'd worked for, they'd pinned it all on him. Was he going to lose here? Again? Don't be stupid. He could almost hear Itachi's quiet demand whispering across his thoughts. With a flash of determination he gripped the kunai shoved almost to the hilt, and yanked the weapon free with a gush of blood, staring at the hated spiral-masked monster and the Tsuchikage who stood with him. Sakura believed going into the fight that it would not be her who shattered the enemy offensive, and wiped the board clean so that they could move together to help Naruto. Because that wasn't her role. It had never been her role. She was not the spear tip, the knife's edge. Her role, despite her overwhelming physical strength, had never been to drive into the heart of an enemy and cut him down quickly. No. She'd always been the rock on which the tide broke, the one that could endure better than most, survive with strength to spare against things that would destroy others. Between her physical durability, ability to evade most attacks hammered into her by long grueling hours of training under Tsunade, and the ability to instantly self-heal from nearly any wound or toxin, there were few things that could kill her if it wasn't done instantly. Surviving a lifetime of ceaseless, unremitting war once before where all others had died proved that in and of itself. But burning in the back of her mind, in the center of her chest, even something rebelled at the thought of being so meek, of passively waiting for Sasuke, or Ryoko to land a kill, to cause an opening, of waiting for them to do what she had spent a lifetime perfecting, the art of killing other people. Intellectually she knew where this was coming from, her other self. The one from here, the one that had trained under Orochimaru, who had struck wooden posts until her knuckles broke, who threaded razor wire in her hair and practiced her fine control over them until her scalp bled, who stretched and contorted until she could pull off even the most absurd techniques of the Hibi Taijutsu flawlessly. That Sakura was not a medic. That Sakura was an assassin. And the thought of waiting, of holding back while Naruto barely healed, barely standing, Naruto fought at Tsuchikage mere feet away while she allowed these three Umbu to keep her away even for a moment longer than necessary, repulsed her other self and made her stir from the depths of Sakura's subconscious. Where her own feelings ended and the others began were rapidly becoming difficult to determine thoughts, melding and merging into something untenable, hesitant, vulnerable. So Sakura did the one thing she felt she could. She let go. Her grasp, her hold on consciousness slipped, and like before, trapped in the world between worlds, her perspective became warped, distant. Like looking through the muddied lens of a warped glass on the other side of a cracked window pane. Instantly, she was afraid. Terrified even. It sent a wash of despair through what remained of her thoughts, wondering if she might ever see the light of the sun again. She wasn't sure how long her thoughts were untethered like this, how long she floated through the realms of this other Sakura's subconscious. But she became aware again at the sound of steel striking steel. A flash, an image, a moment of clarity, and her eyes beheld her hand grappling with someone else. Her kunai screeched against the edge of the man's sword. She spat poison into his eyes through the lenses of his mask. He screamed. Another flash, another instance of the waking world, but this time lingering, more clear. Two circled her now where once there were three, a stolen sword in one hand, kunai blade in the other, moving to try and keep both enemies in her line of sight, the third nearly a corpse now, writhing in agony on the ground as poison ate away the flesh of his eyes. She became aware then of a sensation, burning a line of fire down her shoulder blade. A cut? Yes, she could feel it now, more clear, more defined. The burning wasn't pain, not really. Poison? She knew how to cleanse it, knew how to mold her chakra to push it out of her system, like squeezing pus from a wound. So she did. The pain eased, and the wound quietly began to stitch itself closed. The blood flows, slows, then stops. Redirect the trace elements of the toxin that remain to her liver, her kidneys, strengthen them to handle the toxins and not fail under its effects. Her memory urged her to mold chakra, and with a tenuous, ghostly touch she pressed her will onto this other Sakura's mind, guiding her thoughts, her actions, and the her that was not her followed the instruction flawlessly. But then a change. The toxins were not converted into harmless water and biological junk, rather, they were redirected, warping, changing along her insides, and rising up through the lining of her esophagus, her windpipe, and spewing out of her mouth in a thick cloud of dark poison. The toxins burned at the inside of her mouth, blackened her tongue. The pain was like sliding razor blades along the inside of her voice box. She knew how to heal that too. Joro Saito considered himself a good soldier, a good shinobi. He followed orders, he did his duty. But he was not blind. All of this hadn't sat well with him. It hadn't sat well with many of the Tsuchukage's personal guard details. The Lady Chiome had never been the most personable woman. Hell, most days the woman was downright frigid, looking at those who approached her with eyes cold as ice picks, with a voice that could turn hardened shinobi into weak, trembling things. But she was competent, ruthless, and powerful, everything they needed standing on the precipice of war and ruin. Her strategy for attacking Konoha, this mass general attack, was a risky thing, but risk was part of war, and frankly, with their economic and logistical realities of the village, either he or any of the others he'd spoken to could see a viable path to victory, or even the securing of a favorable peace if they didn't press Konoha now as hard and quickly as possible. The coalition of the minor villages, word of Kumo advancing, and the full weight of Iwa's armies tying down the bulk of Konoha's. The plan had risks, and there would be casualties, but those risks were mitigated, and the casualties, while regrettable, would secure an ultimate victory, allowing the Confederation and Kumo a clean strike straight into the heart of Konoha. So he could see the logic of it, he could understand it. That didn't mean he had to like it. But he was a good shinobi, so he kept his silence, he followed his orders. But this thing, Toby. The man had appeared out of nowhere, quiet and wraith-like, an acquaintance she'd explained once. A spy of some sort was his best guess. They'd followed him, looked into him, but the man was a phantom. Nebulous and invisible. They'd found nothing at all. When they followed, they could not track him. When they tracked him, he made it clear it was because he allowed them to. He could feel that leering smile behind the mask. Always laughing. Always toying with them. Saito hated the man, no matter how valuable his supposed information was. And now this the Sharingan eye, and both his Tsuchukage and the jester laughing at the joke that had finally reached its punch line. Toby knew, or perhaps even Toby and Chiome knew the Uzumaki. Had this whole thing been an elaborate trap to destroy him and him alone? He didn't like it. But he understood. A chance to destroy the Mokuton, wipe it off the board. And not only that, but the Uchiha, the apprentice to Tsunade of the Sannin and 2 of Orochimaru's Kunoichi serpents. Killing all of them, eliminating so many of Konoha's most renowned and powerful elites in one single blow, it would be worth the distaste. For now. Afterwards there could be a reckoning with Chiome and the cursed Toby. But this could not be the time or the place. For now, he had work to do. It would be simple. Medics were not frontline combatants, even one trained by Tsunade. Their combat skills were always lacking in some way. All you needed to do was find the aspect they'd neglected, close, medium, or long range. He moved quickly, falling into line as Sanada and Yorita rushed ahead of him, falling into the familiar pattern of their opening attacks. He expected the Uchiha to tense, to brace himself, perhaps even to try and widen the distance with the retreat to gain some more time to think, to split them up. He did not. It was a glimpse, a moment, an instant. His eyes met those cold black pits through the slits of his mask. Saito felt his stomach turn to ice, his heart stuttering in his chest, his every muscle locking up in a primal, overwhelming fear. Fear of prey staring into the eyes of a predator. Killing intent was his first thought, his first instinct, but it was not that. It was something deeper, something insidious, oily and black, spilling across the surface of his mind, fogging every thought with the certainty of death. The others felt it as well, he could see, the moment they hesitated, the moment their steps faltered and they reconsidered what exactly they were facing. Because this was no medic. Then the Uchiha moved. Saito had seen speed during his years of service, but nothing could compare. In one moment the Uchiha was standing where he's been before, in the next Sanada nearly had a knife in her throat, Umbu blade screaming as she wildly battered aside the thrown projectile with a screech of metal rending metal. He'd barely even registered the man's arm move. Yoruba's hand smacked onto the earth and a single jagged lance of stone shot out of the ground with blinding speed, ready to impale the dark-haired man. Most would have sidestepped, or leapt back to escape the range. The Uchiha medic leapt up and stood with one foot on the very tip of the stone spear. Yoruba hadn't noticed, his line of sight blocked by the massive slab that made up the spear's base mask obstructing his field of view. Another kunai was in the Uchiha's hand, he could see it, almost in slow motion as his fellow Umbu moved to stand, still unaware of the danger. "Move!" he shouted, tossing two shuriken, one towards the Uchiha, the other to hopefully intercept the kunai toss that would kill Yoruba when he stood. The kunai wasn't thrown. With a snap crack of discharged electricity that set his teeth on edge, there was a flash, and Saito felt himself go blind for an instant. When his vision cleared, a blade of lightning, 20 feet long, extended from the Uchiha's fingertips through the tip of the kunai blade, piercing Yoruba's mask and lancing into his brain. The blade burned white hot. The smell of burnt meat filled his nostrils with its sickly sweet scent. Nothing in his file had ever indicated such a high mastery over the lightning element. Increased strength, durability, and aptitude for self-healing, minor genjutsu. Nothing like this. It had been done so cleanly, so effortlessly. He felt the surge of chakra, familiar patterns weaving into the soil, and almost by reflex he began moving, rushing to complete the attack Sanada had called out by sheer familiarity of her abilities. He leapt high into the air, using trees as springboards to get above the topmost opening, ready to breathe down a fireball into the cylindrical furnace. But as he passed over, empty? But where did he? It was the last thought the Umbu would have, as a second later he felt something punch him in the throat, choking as he suddenly struggled to draw in a breath. Uchiha Sasuke hung in the air below him, appearing from nothing, his hand outstretched before falling away. Saito reached for his throat, only faintly recognizing the feel of a kunai ring pommel before the world went dark and he fell dead to the forest floor below. For her own part, Ryoko recognized immediately the tactical situation they were in and how fucked that tactical situation truly was. To be frank, if Naruto was in top form, she would have been considerably less worried. The blonde was a powerhouse, and if she had to put money on him against anyone in the world, she would bet on him every time, no matter who the enemy or the odds. But to put it simply, he wasn't in top form. He was tired, wounded, his chakra depleted, and now off focus with whatever the hell was going on with Sasuke and Sakura, going up against a Tsuchikage and a mask-wearing freak show. He was cut off, isolated, and unwilling to retreat for fear of his rescuers dying in his place. So yes. Considering all this, she had every right to be concerned. Not for herself, really. She was self-aware enough to recognize and understand that her death was irrelevant in the grand scheme of things. But Naruto, Hinata, and even the Uchiha who now looked at her as a stranger, these were harder blows for the village to take. The paths to a victory, or at least denying a defeat, were narrow and shrinking rapidly. In truth, she could only see one viable plan. Deftly maneuvering and hurting her two Umbu opponents, she inched ever closer and closer towards Haruno, bursting through the overhead canopy and dodging a fireball in time to see Sakura spew out a cloud of poisonous gas right in one of her enemies' faces. With a scream, she hurled her wind-powered Fuma shuriken. The weapon spun, twisting and arcing through the air, forcing Sakura's opponents to break off their attack as Sakura turned to look at her. "Haruno!" She grit her teeth. "Go! I've got this!" Sakura balked. No doubt she recognized the odds. Naruto's half dead as it is. You're a medic now, right? Go! Get him out of here. And while she didn't know what the hell was going on with her or Sasuke, she trusted the pink-haired girl marginally more than whatever the fuck had replaced the Uchiha she'd known. The pink-haired woman hesitated, and Ryoko knew she had her convinced already. Catching her returning from a shuriken, Ryoko sent a blast of wind that sent the assassination expert back, shoving her off her perch. Go! She didn't need to be told again. One of them moved to give chase, but a volley of wind-empowered shuriken cut off that thought. Ryoko rounded, facing the four remaining Umbu, and planted a toothy, savage grin on her face, more false bravado than true confidence, as she spun her weapon in her hands. "Which of you volunteered to catch the pointy end first?" When the blast of fire roared across the battlefield, Naruto himself barely had time to erect a stone wall to act as a shield against the incoming flames. The mud wall cracked, flash baked into a dry rock, crumbling against the force of the blast. He felt the shift in the air behind him and rounded, turning on the woman as he caught her by the wrists, stopping her weapon cold as he manipulated the air around them, sucking all the air towards them. The flames spread, sucked into the vortex, turning their battleground into a conflagration of fire and swirling ash. Ma and Pa cried out, struggling to keep their focus as he turned the clearing into a giant kiln. He saw that Sachikage's cloak catch fire, the woman's Sharingan eye snapping away from him as the flames began to lick at her, fully exposed, while the mud wall at his back provided the barest hint of protection. She tried to pull away now, but he held her in place, sucking in more of the winds around them, the superheated air now making it almost impossible to breathe. That Sachikage grit her teeth and with a savage forward lunge, cracked her skull directly onto his teeth, sending him reeling. The pain, coupled with Ma and Pa's focus faltering, caused the sage mode to slip out of his grasp, the delicate balance quickly dissipating, which allowed the Sachikage to yank herself free of his hold and leap backwards, through the flames around them. The force of her passage created a vacuum the flames rushed into. Naruto allowed the winds to die away before reversing their flow, sending the flames scattering outwards and away. Instantly, the air around him cooled, letting him suck down deep, ragged lungfuls of air alongside Ma and Pa. "I'm sorry," he panted. Ma patted him on the cheek. "Don't you worry about us, dearie, we'll be okay," she reassured, her slightly moist pad smacking against his whiskers. Pa tried to smile, but said nothing, and that worried him. That meant they were in bad shape after that. Then he noticed something. Toby was gone. He couldn't sense the man, not even with Sage Mode returning to him, sharpening all of his senses. A spike of panic shot through his guts like a shard of ice. Had he gone after one of the others, or was he preparing to try and take him by surprise again? Had the blast driven him off, or had his supposed lack of chakra to remain in this world finally shown its effects? Worry cloyed his insides, and his already heavy, labored breathing worsened considerably. He rushed to stand, only for the pain of his various injuries to make themselves known again, stopping him cold. Then his panic had to be put aside, senses flaring as he felt the attack approaching from above. His head snapped up, eyes finding that Sachikage falling, sword at the ready, chakra already beginning to crackle and flow into it to create a roaring bolt of living lightning as she swung. The wall behind him collapsed, and he leapt back fast, retreating with a volley of shuriken in answer that she intercepted with perfectly thrown kunai of her own. 3 clangs of steel striking steel, then, smooth as quicksilver, her foot whipped out, kicking one of the tumbling kunai at the ring pommel to send it rushing towards his face. He leaned sideways, the sudden jerk throwing off his balance as she pounced in that moment, forcing him on the back foot, avoiding her sword but receiving another kick to his still wounded side. She was relentless, and blindingly fast. Her genjutsu attempts slammed into his mind over and over again, and he realized that while rebuffing them wasn't a problem, she was taking another approach with the tactic, sheer brute force distraction, splitting his attention in time with her strikes, forcing his defense to be just that split second slower, that little bit more off form and imperfect. He never enjoyed being on the defensive anyway. Without hand seals, his chakra moved and formed, familiar patterns taking shape by pure reflex and instinct, and the woman was surprised when, mid-swing, her arm was caught, and mid-step her feet tripped up. Clones were now at her sides. The two gave him enough breathing room to press his own attack, tangling her limbs, forcing a moment's opening as she took the time to dispel them, only for yet more to appear in their place as they were dispelled, lashing out with kicks and strikes of their own from multiple angles. A strike to the knee, the ribs, a drop kick to the shoulder, a lunging tackle from the side. She was fast, but the lack of hand seals hampered her Sharingan's ability to read the molding of his chakra. Focusing so hard on avoiding his sage-enhanced blows detracted her focus. But it was a success born of surprise. Every subsequent dodge was a bit smoother, every clone dispelling just that split second sooner. The two that formed last were in front of him, and these she dispelled near instantly, the smoke exploding thick and gray, obscuring them both from sight. She whirled, kunai tossed from her swinging arm like a shot, diamond-shaped blade glinting in the dark as it caught him dead center of the chest far above in the canopy of trees. A puff of smoke, not blood, was the answer. Feeling his clone die, he rushed her from below. Earth bent and twisted to his will, splitting apart above him and rushing up beneath him. The ground all but spat him out as chakra whirled in his closed fist, spreading out from the center of his palm as he opened his hand with a snarl, seeing her head whip down, eyes wide as she saw him emerging from the ground at her feet with naked surprise on her face, Tomo spinning wildly. Her sword burst once more with electricity, screeching and crackling with forks of pure lightning as she swung to use it as a last-minute shield. Lightning and Rasengan collided with a scream that rent his mind as though the blow had struck home. With a screech that made ears bleed, metal shattered and exploded outwards. Naruto saw shards of metal tear into her, catching in her armor in many places but also slipping past, cutting into joints and softened weak points as electricity burned under her seared flesh. She screamed, raw pain turning her voice shrill before that scream turned into a roar, fire exploding from her mouth to blast him point blank in the face. The heat seared, and without Sage Mode he had little doubt he would have been crippled outright or worse. As it was, he brought up his free hand, shielding his face and eyes, and felt the skin burn and start to blacken. Again, his chakra moved and a clone appeared at the woman's side once again, kicking her hard enough in the ribs that the bones must have been broken as she skidded back on planted feet. The skin of his hand was charred black, pinky and ring finger seared. His hand trembled and the tingle of his faster than normal healing was present but weaker, the lack of chakra to fuel it noticeable now. In fact, looking at his hand, he could see the webbing on his fingers, the digits longer than they should be. "We can't keep this up, my boy," Pa cautioned. "You're running too low on chakra to maintain balance." Yeah, made sense. He tried to smile, and he wasn't sure how well he pulled it off. "It's alright," he assured. "Think I've got a plan." He could feel the two-toed summons eyeing each other, not quite believing him. "Take shelter in audacity." They told Sasami that her father had said that once. Or perhaps it had been used to describe her father. She thinks, at this moment, staring at the wreckage, that she understands. He has planted himself in front of the Great Eastern Gate. Sitting on a canvas seat, the white banners of Kumogakure hang behind him. The gloom of the early morning gray barely hides the array of shinobi at his back. They have the walls. They have more men behind those walls. They have 2 Jinchuriki, and reinforcements on the way. But in that moment, he is the one who seems to be in control. The one with all the cards to play. "Don't worry." Sasami turns, and Akane is there, standing beside her, peering through the morning fog at the mountain of a man. "I'm right here," the redhead promises. Quietly, the little lady nods, reaching up to take her hand in her own. The other shinobi are preparing not far off, checking weapons, fitting armor. There are a dozen Umbu, but she knows that only 4 of them are real. The rest are props, dressed up to give an impression. Sabaku, the Kazakage, stands beside Sataki-san, the two speaking in an almost hushed conversation she is not privy to. She is the fire lady, but somehow, she does not want to be. She wants this day to be over. To be allowed to leave the pomp and the ceremony and return to Yugago, who still lays half dead in a medical tent along the shadow of the ruined hospital. And if letting them speak without her being present allows that to happen faster, all the better. It's irresponsible. It's not what she should do as the fire lady, but right now she can't bring herself to care. "My lady?" It's another Umbu, faceless, featureless. He's wearing a hawk mask and he bows when she turns to him. "We are preparing to head out. Please join your guard at the rear of the column." She offers a nod, and quietly slips her hand free of Akane's before descending the ramparts towards the main road. Before they got much farther, there was a commotion, a messenger approaching the 2 Kage, screaming for the both of them. "We were not expecting your arrival." The Hokage's voice was courteous, but she noted it carried an edge of caution to it. The Kiri Kunoichi bowed. Sasami noted her skin was pale as ivory and hair long, straight and black as midnight. "Apologies," she said. "But once we heard of the attack we made all haste to arrive as quickly as possible." She turned her eyes eastward, towards where even now the wreckage sat. "Will there be negotiations?" "There will," Gaara confirmed before Kakashi could say anything. The woman bowed again. "Forgive my rudeness, I am Yuki Haku, official liaison of the Mizukage - She looked to Kakashi. "I am her eyes and ears, and as such I would respectfully request to attend these negotiations. Strictly as an observer, of course. I have no official power to speak for Kiri given the lack of information." Sasami noted Kakashi's hesitation. It was the Kazakage who turned to the older man. "It may be seen as an insult to deny her request. Hokage Dano. The silver-haired man's eye moved between the two, and Sasami could see, clearly, he did not like it. As soon as the two-toed sages left their place atop his shoulders, the extent of his weakness nearly knocked him over. He swayed on unsteady feet, grunting as his knees shook. He didn't have long. He could already feel the woman catching up, and when he looked up, red eyes glared back at him, blood leaking from the corner of the woman's lips, teeth grit and eyes narrowed. "Why are you doing this?" He gasped. Partially it was curiosity, but also because he needed time, enough time to catch his breath, enough time to think and set up. Evidently she wasn't going to play his game. With a lunge, she ate up the distance between them. He only caught a glimpse of glinting steel, hands rising in reflex. He caught one wrist, holding the blade at bay, but the other was barely deflected in time, his forearm smacking into her wrist, shoving the blade upwards so it speared his shoulder rather than his chest. He hissed, and was shoved back and back and back before he slammed into a tree behind him, feeling her savagely twist the knife, his remaining arm trembling as he struggled to keep the other knife from finishing the job. He opened his eyes, finding a savage expression on her face, blood-red eyes seemingly drinking in the moment, etching it into her memory as the knife dug in deeper and the other inched closer and closer with his failing strength. He kicked back, planting one foot on the tree and using the increased leverage to lift himself upwards, his other knee rising to try and crack into the underside of her chin. Either he was too slow, or her eyes had allowed her to see the attack coming. With a pivot and a slice, his leg was shredded by two more knives, slices tearing into sinew, flesh and tendon. He gasped, fresh pain sending adrenaline through his system as his arm reached up, smacking into the tree to send chakra tearing the wood, reshaping it into lances and spears that bloomed outward like a Venus flytrap as the top half of the trunk exploded and tilted, falling onto her. She lunged back, avoiding the worst of the debris, though a single solid piece of shrapnel gored her raised forearm. He wasn't sure of the damage, but the snarl that left the woman's lips carried pain at least. Manipulating the tree to part, he slipped to the other side, falling until his one good leg touched the ground, stumbling with the effort to catch himself. Lightning lanced through the tree, a single thin spear that carved open the side of his face. It was so close. He fell onto his side, teeth grit as he tried to right himself. One arm. One leg. He opened his eyes, finding her there, stalking forward, face shrouded in gloom. All he could see was the red of her eyes. It came to him in that moment. "You're him," he breathed. It wasn't a question. She paused, going still. "You're him," he repeated. "Toby from this world." The tomo spun slowly, silence hanging thickly between them. "It's funny," she chuckled. "I didn't think you'd be smart enough to figure it out." She paused. "Yes. I am him, and he is me. He found me long ago. Gave me the tools I would need. Taught me what I'd need. He's using you." He bit out. "He hasn't taught you everything, even at my best. I could barely compete." The admission hurt, but it was true. A world had died proving that point. "But you're not looking so hot, and I started this with one foot in the grave." He wasn't boasting, wasn't trying to. But if he could just... Itachi wasn't the same as the old one. If he could convince her, turn her against Toby himself, then she leaned forward, kneeling to be at eye level with him. "Do you think I care?" He closed his eyes, taking enough time to settle himself where he sat. "Why wouldn't you?" She held her silence for a moment, staring at him, as though judging whether she should say anything at all. Finally, "Do you wish to know the worst thing I've found? The saddest, most wretched fact?" He said nothing. An entire world, a reality of differences, big and small, where innumerable changes and circumstances have been altered, and yet, Konoha. IWA, there's still irrefutably worthy of my hatred, worthy of destruction. She shook her head. So why should I care if I'm used as a means to his ends, when our ends are exactly the same? She stood from her kneeling position. "If it's any consolation," she whispered, "unlike him, I don't hate you, you're just in my way." Her hand rose, knife in hand. The ear-piercing shriek that exploded from the trees sent that knife clattering to the floor. The woman's hands reflexively released her hold on it to grasp at her ears. Ma and Pa sang on either side of her, emerging from their hiding places in the underbrush, songs in harmony as they battered the kunoichi with waves of crippling sound. She realized her mistake, realized the danger too late. Lunging for her knife, he gripped it with his one remaining arm, lunging forward with every last ounce of speed he could force into his uninjured leg. The blade punched into the woman's chest, slamming into the hard sternum, it slipped his grip, letting his hand slide upwards enough to cut himself seconds before his injured arm struck, palm hammering the ring pommel with enough force to crunch through the hard sternum, piercing her heart in a single, final blow as his blood mixed with hers, red bubbling up from her lips as her eyes went from the wound to himself. Shock and disbelief naked on her features before the light of life flickered and died in those eyes. She pitched forward, and the last of her strength was used, trying to shove her remaining kunai into his stomach, but the strength was gone, the tip catching and tangling itself with the weave of his vest as he fell to the forest floor beside her. Ma and Pa hopped over to him, screaming out his name as he breathed, blinking up at the smoke-shrouded canopy above. "I'm all right," he wanted to say. Instead, what emerged out of him was a strangled, coughing wheeze, pain beginning to throb through every inch of his body as he began to struggle to move again. "Hold still!" Ma protested. "My friends," he coughed out. They still needed help. Pa leapt up and unbelievably plopped himself down on the blonde's chest, using sheer weight to pin him in place. "You'd be more an impediment than a help as you are," he remarked. "Give us a moment to try and help a little bit before you go off and get yourself killed." The sounds of battle were distant, but still loud enough to reach him as he grit his teeth, trying to move his shredded leg only to find the limb was near dead weight. "Hurry," he rasped. Toby was still out there. Pa made a disapproving sound. "Damn idiot boy, you're gonna get yourself killed." He felt Ma's pads touching the wound on his leg, her cool touch soothing in itself as he felt the esoteric healing the toads used beginning to slowly stitch the worst of his injuries closed. There was a sound, movement above, and all three of them tensed, with Pa grabbing hold of his tiny cane like he was ready to whack whoever emerged from the gloom. But it wasn't Toby. The relief Naruto felt at the sight of pink hair almost knocked the wind right out of him. Sakura's seafoam green eyes raked over him, her brow immediately furrowed in concern as she rushed forward, coming to a stop beside him. She spared a momentary glance to the corpse of the Tsuchikage beside them before she asked, "Are you all right?" He managed to chuckle, somehow. "Don't worry. I'm only half dead. She got it worse than me." She smacked him on the back of the head, growling, "Don't be an idiot." Then she blinked, and he saw a momentary shock ghost over her features as she looked at her hand, as though disbelieving that she'd struck him. In spite of himself, Naruto felt his heart sink a bit. Was the other Sakura's time up already? But his worry was premature. The kunoichi seemed to close her eyes, concentrating for a moment, and it was strange, like someone shifting their weight onto the back foot within her. And then, when she opened her eyes, her hands immediately began to glow green. With the skill of a master, the energies began knitting flesh, setting bone, and casting away the pain of shorn ligaments and torn muscle with even more speed than Ma had been able to achieve. The two summoned toads stepped closer, crowding around them as Naruto heard the sounds of distant fighting. "That's Dash, Ryoko," Sakura interrupted. "Hold still. The faster this gets done, the sooner we can go help her. Where's Toby?" The voice made all of them jump, with Sakura going so far as to throw a kunai from her thigh holster in reflex, which Sasuke easily evaded with a deft sidestep. "Don't do that!" Naruto hissed, feeling something shift along his insides with a sharp stab of pain at the sudden movement. Then he answered the question. "I don't know, he disappeared halfway through my fight. I can't sense him." Sasuke snarled. He marched a bit closer towards the dead Tsuchikage before rounding on them. "We have to get you out of here, you're the linchpin. If he gets a hold of you, we're done. Not without Ryoko. And not until I heal these ribs, unless you want him dying of punctured lungs." Sakura protested. "Ryoko isn't important." The look Naruto gave him was heated. The look Sakura offered him was flat and deadpan, as if to remind him of who exactly he was talking to. Sasuke didn't resist the urge to roll his eyes. Right. Because this was Naruto, and he was still a fucking idiot who wanted to save everyone. With a thought, he formed two clones, sending them off, and felt just a bit more of his control over this body slip, a bit more of himself ebb away from this world. He didn't say it, but he knew he didn't have much time left. Ma stepped forward, patting the blonde on the knee. "Now don't you worry, Sonny, me and Pa will go and help your friend." "We will?" Pa asked. "Of course we will," Ma snapped. "He's too tired to use nature chakra properly, and this sweet girl has his healing covered, so what good are we doing here? Let's go and be useful." With that haughty declaration, the toad woman turned smartly and bounced away, Pa shrugging and hopping off behind her after a moment. Ryoko had known going in from the moment she'd rushed in to take the pressure off of Sakura that she was likely signing her own death warrant. Taking on even two of the Tsuchikage's elite bodyguard would have been a tall order. And here she decided to jump in against four. Even so, she actively engaged them all as much as she could, making sure none slipped past her to go after Sakura, and they had tried. And so after a few close calls to her wind blades, they decided to focus on her and eliminate her from the board. She'd made them work for it, but even so, they weren't elite for nothing. They covered for each other, nullifying her wind blades with their own techniques, winning positioning battles and denying her room to maneuver, pulling away her options one by one to secure a victory without careless casualties. Her luck finally ran out when a column of shifting stone catapulted out of the ground to catch her in the ribs with a crack she felt run along her whole body as her insides shifted in a way they shouldn't. She hit the ground with a gasping cough, a singular death grip on her weapon to make sure she wouldn't drop it as she tried to suck down a ragged breath of air. "You don't have time to be hurt," her sensei's voice reminded her. She moved with speed born of adrenaline, the pain in her ribs cutting through her in a way that nearly buckled her before she shoved it away and whipped her weapon through the air. The clang of steel against steel rang as she battered aside an Ambu's sword. She moved to reach her feet before the earth itself split open beneath one leg, sending her falling in before the dirt slammed shut like a bear trap over her shin, puncturing muscle and nearly cleaving bone as she screamed. Still holding tight onto her weapon, Ryoko forced her eyes open, forced her sluggish mind to work. Still four, they were still here. Good. Damn bitch gave us plenty of trouble. One of them cursed. Trouble's done. Now get it over with so we can get to the Haruno and Uzumaki GLKHN. The man's words were abruptly and violently cut off as a kunai suddenly punched through the side of his throat, the ring pommel on one end, and the tip sticking out the other. It was the only warning any of them got. A second later, a crackling, long blade of lightning speared out of the trees, lancing through another Ambu's shoulder, sending him tumbling in twisting convulsions to the earth below, and a horrible, screeching sound doubled over another. The one closest to her, twisted looking this way and that way, momentarily disoriented by the chaos. She wasn't so weak as to pass up the opportunity. With a scream she threw her Fuma shuriken, a frayed, sloppy wind enhancement shrouding the blades. He realized his mistake too late. He tried to leap away but too slow and too close. Before he'd even left the ground, unnaturally sharp blades cut him, splitting shin bones like cheap sticks, carving through muscle and sinew. The man screamed, one half of his lower leg flopping to the side like a limp noodle, hanging on by bits of flesh before she lunged forward, as best she could, ignoring the tearing agony in her own leg as she pulled on the bear trap like jaws of stone clamping down on her. She grabbed him by the scruff of his cloak and dragged him closer as he tried to roll away. He was close now, and though he was hurt, so was she. She wasn't sure if she had the time to risk pulling a knife. So she didn't bother. It descended into a brawl rather than a fight between ninja. Fists and elbows rained down on the man, and after the pain of his leg stopped fogging his mind, he tried to fight back. He wasn't stupid. He focused on her wounded ribs, capitalizing on the damage, and though she tried to defend, before long she felt blood pooling at the back of her throat. She heard her own breathing become thin and wheeze after a blow landed. But she didn't have the luxury of feeling pain right now. She kept hammering at him, beating her fists over his head and face. His mask broke, shards digging into flesh, cutting her fists, his cheeks and eyes. She heard him scream, and she hit him even more. She didn't stop. His face, his skull, his throat, she clawed and punched and struck with the desperate, animalistic fury of a woman who knew if he got back up then she would likely be in his shoes moments later. Soon enough his arms flopped to the side as he went limp. Soon enough he stopped breathing. She didn't stop until the pain of broken knuckles and torn flesh broke through the desperate rage. She breathed, panting like a winded dog, suddenly exhausted as she shoved the body away. Awkwardly, she adjusted her position, looking down at her leg, finding shards of rock ensnaring her, punching bloody holes into the flesh there. She was not an earth element wielder, but she knew enough to pry the plates of stone apart now that the caster was meat for the carrion. Inch by inch the jaws of stone parted, and after a moment she was able to pull her leg free with a grunt of pain, bits of stone and dirt staying inside the flesh. She likely wasn't moving anywhere fast. Sloppy. The voice made her jump. When she opened her eyes it was Sasuke standing there, or at least the caricature that had come to replace Sasuke. He stared at the corpse, then to her chewed-up leg and shredded hands. You may not be using those limbs again unless Sakura gets to you. You're a medic last time I checked. She hissed, glaring at the man she barely recognized. Sasuke offered a look of distaste, as though the very thought was offensive. Can't help you, he finally muttered. Can't or won't? Both. He offered a careless shrug. Once I give up control, I'm not sure if I can get it back at this point. The fuck did that even mean? Before she could either ask, or he could say anything else, they both felt it. Cold pooled in her stomach, and for the first time, this strange, alien Sasuke showed an expression beyond dismissive disdain as his eyes darted over her head to somewhere distant behind her. Fear. Sasuke paced like a caged animal, restless with his chakra crackling under his skin. Like a pulsing beating heart, crackling with an electric charge under the surface. In short, he was nervous, or afraid. It was with an almost visible effort that he stopped himself from pressing Sakura to hurry up, knowing the pinkette was already working as quickly as she could. Something was wrong. Stop pacing! Naruto hissed through clenched teeth as Sakura set a bone with an audible crunch, making the blonde gasp in pain-filled relief. Sasuke shook his head. He wouldn't do this, he muttered. It wouldn't just be this. It can't be this simple. He's chased you across time and space for centuries. And now he just stops. He didn't need to press the issue, he could see the disquiet in both their eyes. They agreed, but they had no idea what could be happening either. Sasuke sighed, rubbing his forehead. It can't just come down to some no-name Tsuchi dash. He stopped. Instantly he turned, fire already building in his throat, spilling out between his teeth. He roared a blast of flame onto the corpse he should have burned immediately. Too late. The fire struck, and it was like water pouring over stone, crashing, breaking. Then he felt it. Slick like oil, twisted and diseased, the feeling of the chakra washed over his mind like sludge as he heard the laugh echo in his skull. Figured it out, did you? The woman's knees began to move, twitching at first and then becoming more firm in their movements as they bent upwards, planting both feet firmly on the ground. Then she began to rise, back arching, limbs dangling. There was a fountain of thick, dark blood flowing from the kunai still lodged in her chest. He heard Sakura hiss behind him, as Naruto tried, feeble as the attempt was, to reach his feet. With a screech of 1,000 birds he was sprinting across the clearing. His arm thrust forward, and the next thing he realized his target was too far to the right, inside his guard, her grin leering with too many teeth. You don't have the eyes to use this technique anymore. There was a flash of steel and he barely grabbed her forearm fast enough, the kunai blade slamming into his gut, cutting into organs and vitals. She yanked it out, nearly plunged it in again before he rushed away, getting out of reach so fast he nearly lost his footing on the landing, skidding to a stop before falling to one knee as he clutched at the hole, physically keeping his insides inside. She rushed to attack. She was fast, faster than she had any right to be, the corpse stiff and jerking, pulled along by brute force chakra control. There was a flash of pink and a thunderous crash. Sakura grabbed the corpse woman's wrists, digging in her heels, refusing to buckle an inch as her muscles bunched and tensed with the strain of physically holding back the creature that seemed poised to overpower her. He's slipping through, Sasuke realized. More and more, with every passing second, he was using the Tsuchikige's corpse to force more of himself through the breach in time. He wanted Naruto for this. But apparently whoever this corpse woman was, she was making for an adequate replacement. The woman laughed, and the voice wasn't hers. Sakura's knees shook, her legs trembling, arms beginning to shake, and Sasuke realized he could be hurt later. Another Chidori screamed on his fist, pillars of glowing wood rising from the ground around Sakura and the corpse, suppressing the malevolent chakra shroud that had begun to surround it, spilling out from the oily, black blood oozing from her chest. He lunged in again. But this time, the chakra shroud roiled, moved and lashed out, clashing against the Chidori like a living wall of black, lashes of energy blasting back in his face, burning at his eyes and skin, tearing at his arm and chest as he tried to force the shrieking lance of lightning through to rip through the corpse's heart, where the final gate's chakra point was located. Sakura rallied, forcing one final burst of strength out of straining muscles. With a scream of defiant rage, the corpse's wrist bones splintered and crumbled. Breaking under the force of her grip, the dead woman bared her teeth. Insects! You have been a nuisance long enough! With that final roar, the chakra seemed to intensify, like water swelling a balloon to bursting. The wooden Mokutan pillars Naruto had pulled from the earth splintered and broke with sundering cracks, exploding outwards to drive Sasuke back with a cry of pain as the burning, toxic energy spread up his arm like living fire. Sakura herself tried. By God, did she try refusing to fall to her knees seemingly by sheer willpower alone before the possessed corpse finally overcame her strength and delivered a powerful kick directly into Sakura's chest. The pink-haired girl flew backwards, skipping over the forest floor like a spinning stone over a calm lake before she crashed into a boulder, her body nearly destroying the massive slab outright as she fell forward, a fountain of blood exploding from her lips. She crashed onto her hands and knees and struggled to hold onto consciousness. More pillars of wood emerged, larger, stronger, and Sasuke darted his eyes over to Naruto, whose face looked almost ashen with how pale it was, blood beginning to ooze from his nose. The idiot was going to kill himself. Sasuke tried to move, only to suddenly feel his control over the body lurch out of his hands, the chains with which he'd suppressed the other Sasuke tense, and nearly shatter outright as the other Uchiha roared within the depths of their minds. Sasuke gasped, his vision going dark at the edges as he tried to shove his other self back into the tightly bound box he'd forced him into until this task was done. His other pulled at the chains, now aware of the situation, the urgency around them, and refusing to go quietly. "Let me out," the other roared, demanding. 3 columns of glowing Mokuton would pin the corpse woman in place, seemingly trying to crush her as they pressed down on the black chakra shroud. Massive, beast-like claws of ephemeral energy reached up, grasping the crushing pillars of wood and slowly, agonizingly slowly pried them apart, pushing them away as the corpse creature smiled wide, staring at the blonde with spinning red eyes. Sasuke's eyes widened, his stomach opening into a pit as he realized too late what was about to happen. With a laughing, gleeful lunge, the possessed corpse launched itself at the blonde, the dark shroud growing teeth and claws. A devouring, all-consuming hunger now creeping into that insane laughter, so close to its ultimate goal. He tried to move, Sakura did too, it wouldn't matter. Then something stopped it. A black blur, slamming into the monster's side, struggling with it, fighting with it. A part of Sasuke's conscious and less than conscious mind recognized it, recognized her, the identity clicking into place as he saw the pale woman's own red eyes burning in her gaze, her face a rictus of furious anger as she grappled with the monster. Itachi. His sister pulled the thing close, its chakra burning at her arms, tearing at her skin, even as she breathed flames so hot he could swear they rivaled the legendary Amaterasu, refusing to let go of the body until Sasuke heard Tobi finally screaming in actual pain before he finally managed to break off from the engagement, retreating with an angered roar. Itachi's hands were burnt, cuts had opened along the exposed skin of her face and arms, leaking blood that contrasted brightly against her pale skin. Even so, her breathing was steady and she stood stronger than they did at the moment. "Anchan!" Naruto gasped, clearly as surprised as any of them at the sight of Itachi standing there. "Stay away from him," she growled somewhere deep in her chest. The flames finally died away, revealing a face half charred, the stark white of bone peeking through the edge of the corpse woman's eye socket, one Sharingan eye now glassy and ruined. "Why can't you people just die?" it snarled. Then it smiled, staring at the stoic Itachi. I don't think I actually had the pleasure of killing you directly last time." Itachi, the other Sasuke, yanked and pulled at the chains. The Sasuke on the surface grit his teeth. "A year." The words circled around Orochimaru's thoughts, bouncing around in his skull, incessant and unceasing. Jiraiya. Alive. Clinging to life. For them to come rescue him. For him to be able to see them again for a year. He should have kept looking. He should have kept looking until they found a body. The war was over after Hanzo's death. He could have dedicated more time, more effort. Why? Why hadn't he? What the hell had been so important? And now here he stands, tasked with killing the last 2 students of his one-time teammate. The last piece of him on this earth. The kunai rested in his hand, and never before had it felt heavier. The water barrier whirled and swirled around the two. It was powerful, but it couldn't be unbreakable. Lightning or earth. Either might do the job. Nagato himself was powerful but stationary. There was a reason Conan had fought so hard to protect him, defend him. He stood listlessly, listening to the pitter-patter drops of rain and cascading streams of water. He knew what he had to do. Before he could move, before he could act, there was a hand at his wrist, another reaching down to the knife. Looking to take it. His fingers gripped tight. "What are you doing?" Tsunade was quiet at his side, her hair framing her face, casting it in shadow. The quiet between them lasted for a small window of eternity. He knew what she would say, because he felt it too. Let's leave. We can't. His response was automatic, reflexive. She looked at him, and he wasn't sure if it was tears he saw, or the rainwater streaming down her face. We fulfilled our mission, she said. She is the mission, he reminded. Then we failed, she answered. Shit happens. Whatever fucking excuse you need, write it in the damn report and I'll back you up. The laugh was bitter in his throat. Yes, I suppose I should be used to failure given the subject matter. A pause. What happened with Jiraiya wasn't your fault. I was the one crippled, he reminded. I was the reason neither of you would retreat. And that wasn't your fault, she pressed. And if you feel that way, don't do this. He offered a careless, weary shrug of his shoulders. What does it matter now? He's dead. Sparing them won't bring him back. She looked at him. He did not meet her eyes, staring instead to the quiet Nagato still cradling the bleeding Konan. You told me once that you were afraid. Her hand squeezed his, gripping his fist over the knife, pleading with no words to let it go. Afraid of becoming that monster Naruto told us about. Afraid of the day you'd step too far and never be able to come back. What did I say? He didn't answer. What did I say? She insisted. That I was a good man. And that whoever couldn't see that was a fucking idiot. She stepped in front of him, releasing her hold over his hand. If you do this, then I can't see it either, Oro. The man I know won't walk out of here with me. His grip tightened, white-knuckled over the blade. The gates grown open. The Kazekage and the Hokage are the first, the assortment of guards for the both of them second, behind them near the rear of the column is her and Akane, and then, finally, 3 shinobi from Kirigakure. Sasami sits on a palanquin, held up by 4 turtle summons, her hair tied in a knot, a kimono of fire red draped over her shoulders. Slowly, they make their way forward, and as they do, she recognizes the adherents to tradition as its Kumon ninja who bring forward canvas seats for Hataki-san and Sabaka-san. The two bow as they retreat back behind the rakeage, but she notes the weapons at their sides, how they don't turn their backs even for a moment. The guard part, splitting evenly to stand around her, though Akane is still closest. The turtles lumber forward, like boulders on legs, and though she can't see the summoned animal's features where she kneels, she knows that the animals are glaring at the rakeage in front of them. As all 3 Kage sit, the silence that falls over them is a thick, heavy thing, broken only by the early morning sounds that seem too distant, too far removed from this little pocket of the world. You know what I came to demand? A finally says. The man's voice is like a rolling thunderstorm, and he glares at Kakashi, his lip curled with the beginnings of a sneer. The Hokage, for his part, cuts to the chase as well. Your Nibi Jinchuriki. He answers, then leans forward, elbows on his knees. But this is a negotiation, Reikage Dano, not a surrender. What is your offer? Up panned his eyes over the group arrayed in front of him. Kiri, your presence is unexpected. The woman, Yuki Haku, raises a slender hand. Merely observers, for now, Reikage-sama. A seem to accept that answer. Where are the Kazekage's guard, I wonder? Sasami tries not to shift where she kneels. She's heard that the Kazekage came alone, that his guard were still nearly a full day's hard march away. She is no expert on war, but she knows that is not information the Reikage should know. This negotiation is between Kumogakure and Kanehigakure, Reikage Dano. The Kazekage cut in. My men need not be here for this. Even so, a leader needed guards, she knew that, but she prayed the Reikage would believe the lie. She doubted he did. A turned his eyes back to Kakashi. My offer is this, you will surrender Yujito to me, along with the Nibi, and I will leave, without finishing the task of burning your village to the ground. Kakashi took a deep breath, like a disappointed teacher as he crossed one leg over the other, his chin resting over his fist. That's not going to happen. He promised slowly. Even discounting the reinforcements already on their way, you don't have the strength to take this village, Reikage. You didn't yesterday, when you had every advantage going for you. What makes you think you can succeed today? Bold words from a man who's standing on the shoulders of children to shield his weakness. The Reikage's eyes trailed over to Akane, and then to her, and Sasami felt herself wilt under that hard, burning gaze. In spite of herself, regardless of all propriety and appearances, her hand darted out, gripping Akane's in hers and squeezing tightly as the redhead squeezed back, stepping closer to the palanquin. Insult me all you like, but it won't change the truth," Kakashi promised with a careless shrug before his one visible eye opened and he stared at the wreckage with an almost bored air. "We have your Jinchuriki. Your position here is untenable. The fact that you called for this negotiation proves that. So let's cease with the posturing wreckage Dano. A fair exchange. Your Nibi Jinchuriki, in exchange for a return of all Konoha citizens of viable breeding age that carry or can potentially carry bloodlines." Sneered openly. "One in exchange for dozens? Did I hit you so hard it addled your wits, dog?" Kakashi shrugged. "That is my first and final offer." He looked at the man. "I wonder what secrets we'll discover in Miss Yujito? Beyond the obvious Nibi, of course. Your sealing mastery, training processes, techniques. I imagine you invested heavily given her status. Quite a treasure trove you lost so carelessly." If looks could kill, Kakashi would have been little more than a pile of cinders and ash. Leaned forwards, and all but barked at the Hokage. "Do not push your luck, dog. You're not in any grand position of power either," he warned. "I know IWA has attacked you on all fronts. Those reinforcements you've called for, if you've called for them, will guarantee your frontline defenses break under the onslaught. You have no reserves to call on, your elites are all miles away, and your only cards left to play is Tsunade's daughter and the Kazekage, who will extract a hefty toll for his services once all is done, I'm sure." Kakashi gave no outward sign if the words affected him, but the silence he gave was answer enough. "I am making these demands, A hissed. "Because unlike a man who tears apart his own hospital, killing his own injured people, just to win a fight, I would rather keep the collateral to a minimum." He pressed one meaty finger into the Hokage's chest. "Do not mistake my lack of desire for needless bloodshed for any fear of you. You are unworthy of the seat you hold, of the trust placed on you." The sheer contempt in the Raikage's voice seared in his expression was a thunderous, violent thing. "Now return to me my kunoichi, or this exchange is over." The silence hung heavy between them, thick enough it could be carved with a knife. Kakashi's head moved minutely. "No." A stood. "Then we have nothing left to discuss." He turned to walk away. "Raikage Dano, Hokage Dano. If I may?" It took Akane a moment to recognize the voice, and her eyes darted towards Gaara, as did both A's and Kakashi's. "The both of you are right," the Kazekage said. "Your respective positions are untenable." He raised his head, reaching up to the blindfold to pull it down, revealing his seafoam green eyes. To her right, Sasami saw the Yuki woman step forward. She stepped up behind the Kazekage, hands clasped behind her back. An open, clear display of solidarity even she could see immediately. "But mine is not. Itachi was not a Jinchuriki, nor was she gifted with a wealth of past experience fighting this monster that had clawed its way here from the death throes of a fading world. But looking at her now, Naruto was sure anyone would be hard-pressed to say she did not measure up, or even surpass any of them in the fight. She clashed against the beast in front of her with the strength of a storm, flashing knives, burning flames, forks of lightning. She weaved illusion, shadow and light in a show of pure mastery of all arts of the shinobi. She was, by every measure of the word, the best, better than him, better than Tobi. Fighting him alone where the three of them had failed. And it wasn't enough. Perhaps it could have been, perhaps if any of them had been at their full strength when this started they could have won. But he could see it in her. She hit it well, nearly perfectly, but he knew her too well. He knew her when she was strong, when she was weak, when she was sure, when she had doubts. Whatever she'd done to get here, however fast or long she traveled, had taken a toll. She was slower, sluggish, her brows were not knit in concentration but in effort, her hands trembled as she held her weapons, and her calf trembled as she danced between attacks. He wanted to help, had tried to, but his chakra was well and truly spent, and the little strength he'd gained from Sakura's healing was little more than what he needed to stay conscious. Despite his every urge and instinct, he knew beyond a shadow of a doubt, if he tried to help, he would get her killed. The fight was moving faster now, picking up speed as she realized she could not keep this up forever. She was getting desperate, trying to force an opening, a victory while she still had the strength. Naruto shut his eyes, furious at his own uselessness, his own weakness. Watching Itachi fight a battle she never should have had to fight. Don't let her die, please. If there's anything out there listening, please don't let her die. His world became the battle, watching the exchange of blows, the rapid movements, searching for the mistake, the slip that would mean the end, and praying to every god he long since stopped believing in to let her be the one to win out in the end. Then, it wasn't just them anymore. With the screech of 1,000 birds, a lance of lightning ripped into the chakra shroud's side, and an impact that could shatter mountains punched into the shroud from above, sending the corpse within down onto her knees. Sasuke and Sakura pressed the attack, and he could see the flesh of Sasuke's exposed arm burning and healing, his heels digging into the ground, pushing divots into the earth as he tried to brute force himself through. Itachi formed her own hand seals quickly, 2 clones appearing at her sides before she breathed out a pillar of flame. The fire exploded into an inferno as one clone breathed out wind and the third darted quickly to the other side, a length of lightning forking out of her fingers, reaching to form a circuit with Sasuke. The black chakra rippled, pulsed, and heaved like a slowly rising beast. Then it blasted outwards. With screams of pain, all of them were thrown back, tumbling and scraping across the ground, slamming into trees and stones. He saw the Uchiha princess thrown backwards, trying to adjust her fall, but unable to. The top of her head scraped off of a stone as she twisted her body, contorting painfully as it hit the earth, and with barely any strength left, he himself lunged for her, feeling the impact of her body against his as he caught her, tumbling beside her as he clutched her tight. The black chakra seemed to reach upwards, darkening the sky, blackening the forest in a miasma of poison. He lay there beside her, opening his eyes to find blood trailing down her face, from a gash at the top of her head, seeping through her dark hair. Her eyes were glassy, regaining focus slowly as she fought off the disorientation. "You need to run," he begged. She wouldn't listen. She reached up, grabbing him by the scruff of his jacket before she forced herself on trembling limbs to stand once again. Then she turned and faced the monster. "Get up," his mind hissed. "Get up." His limbs trembled, and every remaining ounce of his strength was barely enough to get him to rise to one knee before he nearly fell down again, and tears of pure frustrated rage burned at the corners of his eyes. Poor little Naruto, trying so hard and failing again and again. How many times will I kill your friends before you realize you can't save them from me? You won't touch him. Itachi breathed, visibly forcing herself to stand tall. The dead woman's eyes seemed to dance with glee. "Are you volunteering to die first then, Inchan?" She said nothing. "As you wish." The monster moved. Naruto moved. And something answered. A crackling claw of gold. Naruto stared, his own hand extended outwards, the chakra claw reaching out from his own fingers, catching the black and sickly energy with unyielding force. Naruto felt his breathing hitch, his own heart stuttering in his chest as, slowly like a trickle, into a stream, into a flood, he felt energy, power, welling up within him. Familiar. Comforting. Kyuubi? No. No. Not now. He heard Tobi's voice, but for once couldn't pay it any thought. It was irrelevant, inconsequential. The energy reached through, up the length of his arm, across his body. He felt his whisker marks changing, his vision becoming sharper, the wellspring of power spreading through him, healing wounds and banishing the exhaustion. Kurama? Kurama? Quietly, he was dragged into the familiar space of the seal. It was as it has always been. The waters lapped at his ankles, the bars looming like monoliths. But the inside wasn't empty. He could see the red fur first. His friend lay there, pressed against the bars, breathing softly. He had scars. Patches where fur didn't grow, white lines peeking through the crimson. Burns, slashes, tears, and bites. They crisscrossed his body now. A litany of pain. An ode to a war, a fight that had never ended. Not for him. "Oh!" Naruto gasped, feeling the tears prickle at his eyes. "Oh, Kurama!" A single great eye opened, and it too was scarred, the flesh around the eye torn and jagged. His friend sighed, like someone returning to sit by the fire after years of being away. "You're taller than I remember." A breathless, incredulous laugh escaped him, despite himself, and the tears flowed freely down his cheeks. You missed a lot." The eye focused on him, weary, exhausted. It closed. "Yes. I have." There was a silence he couldn't fill. Questions, reassurance, he didn't know what to say. It seemed petty. Then the moment was over, and his friend slowly began to rise, revealing more of the scars lining his body. "But I sense him here," Kurama rumbled, staring down at him almost like a patient father. "Your fight isn't over yet." Naruto shook his head. "No, it's not." The kitsune offered a smile that was all fangs and jagged teeth. "Then let's go and finish it." He opened his eyes again to a world of golden light. He felt Kurama's energy flowing through him, warm and bright, a soothing balm to the oily, sickly thing that was Tobi's. He stepped forward, standing beside Itachi and helping her stand, trickles of golden energy flowing into her to heal some of her own wounds. Tobi pulled away. That Satsuki's features twisted into a snarl of rage and for the first time, fear. Fear that it couldn't win. Not like this. How are you here? The monster asked. A visage of Kurama appeared at Naruto's shoulder, a golden kitsune head answering. You are not the only one who can cast off pieces from the greater whole. Or did you think I hadn't wised up to that trick after so long? He snorted. Your arrogance was always surpassed by your stupidity. The vestige snarled. Not now. Not while I'm so close. Kurama answered. The story of your life. Naruto felt a prodding at the back of his mind, an urge. Attack. He listened. He lunged forward, gold and black crashed into each other, cascading fire and stardust across the forest. The winds buffeted trees, uprooting them and sending concussive waves through the woods. The monster reached deep, pulling more of its energy, pushing against him, trying to force him away, but Kurama answered the surge in kind. You were so close to saving your precious Rin. You failed. Attack. He struck again, tearing away both of their shrouds and claws of fire and tearing shade. So close to obtaining all of the Biji, you failed. Attack! He fought directly with her now, no chakra shrouds, no barriers, he moved with renewed energy, and now it was the corpse puppet that was slow and sluggish. Bones broke, flesh tore. So close to plunging the world into your perfect illusion. You failed. Attack! He recognized the pain there, mirrored within himself, years of pain, physical and otherwise. His scars ran deeper than flesh, but Kurama had never stopped fighting, never stopped feeling the physical pain of this war. How long had his friend been there? Trapped in the world between worlds? Fighting, breaking, bleeding? All for him? And you? Just keep failing. Every word was a landed strike, a broken arm, shattered ribs, a torn throat. And still it kept moving. Naruto's hands were caught by the wrist, the corpse struggling to hold him back now, all of its remaining strength moving to the physical shell anchoring it to this world. You're trapped with no way out. A mewling shade crying into the dark that he's still dangerous. The demon smiled, a rictus grin, savage and hateful, red momentarily leaking into the gold of the shroud around them. Look around you. I can see it. Can you? Everything you hope to destroy, ha ha ha. It's still standing. The red eyes of the Sharingan burned. Hateful, smoldering pit staring into his own wrathful gaze. Then, with a savage tear, he grabbed the kunai blade he'd rammed into the corpse's chest, and with a single, precise strike, hammered the blade directly into her heart, gold chakra seeping through the weapon to burst along her insides. The corpse jerked, the eyes glowing gold for a moment before finally, it was over. The body burned, smoldering slowly from the inside out before finally dissolving into cinders and ashes. Numbly, Naruto held on to the kunai, staring at it and the ashes that were even now scattering to the wind. The space in front of the village gates was as silent as a crypt. All eyes were on the Kazekage and the Yuki Kunoichi now. The redhead adjusted his position on the seat before gesturing to the raikage. Sit. Please. Akane was not sure if it was a request or a demand. Slowly, wary, the raikage returned to his seat. As soon as he did, Gaara spoke. You claimed I would extract a hefty price for my services here. In a sense, I suppose you're correct, but not in the way you believe. Then enlighten me. Said, then darted his eyes to Kakashi. Or should I more accurately say us? For a moment, Gaara was silent. Finally, the truth of the matter is, it's unlikely Konoha can win this war without Tsunagekire's help. He declared, turning his eyes to Kakashi. With our help your victory is nearly assured. With our help, along with Kirigakure, it is guaranteed, as would be your defeat should either of us choose to side against you. Kakashi tensed. The Kiri delegation, he said slowly. You've been in negotiations with them long before today. It was Kiri who informed me of Kumo's movements. They detected it first. He paused. We attempted to send an advance warning, but our messenger seems to have been waylaid at sea. To her credit, the Yuki woman sounded genuine, bowing deeply before the Hokage. I realize that might be difficult to believe, but I am being sincere and I deeply apologize. Kakashi scratched at his chin, eyes closed, no doubt his mind running 1,000 paces a second. Konoha has fought off all 4 villages before. That was then. As strong as Uzumaki and Uchiha Itachi-san are, you are not the same power now. Gaara answered flatly. So now you hold a coalition of the southernmost powers. Ace surmised. And you wish to offer your services to the highest bidder to guarantee victory for that side. Gaara stared at him. No. I am part of a coalition of the southernmost powers, and I am going to use that coalition to get all of you to stop. That gave them all pause. Haku nodded. As the official representative of Kirigakure, I can confirm that this is the political stance of the Mizukage. She backs the Kazekage's proposal, fully. A lean forward where he sat. As it stands, Suna and Kiri have remained wholly untouched by the Konoha-Iwa conflict. Both sides have bled each other white. Like us, Kiri has been building up for years, both militarily and in terms of their daimyo's naval strength. Suna similarly has been expanding their economy greatly in the last half-decade. He glared at both the Kunoichi and the Kazekage. You are in a powerful position, and can easily seize a great many spoils no matter which side you take, and you expect me to believe you and Kiri have agreed to use all of this power to simply play peacekeeper? Yes. He answered simply. Pretend we do believe in your goodwill. Kakashi began. Why? Haku-san offered another bow. For as long as I have lived, I have dreaded the day I would need to kill any friends of mine. She said. I have made friends from other villages many times, including your own Uzumaki Naruto Hokage-sama. And I too would like to see this dream become a reality. You are not the Mizukage, Kakashi said. Wars are not just foreign. She answered, alluding, Sasami realized to the civil war that had brought the Mizukage to power. Would not peace across the nation ensure a future where such a thing can happen again? Masama believes so. The Kazekage seemed to measure his words for a moment, thinking quietly. Someone I admire greatly, who is admired by others in many places, told me he had a vision of this world at peace, where all these petty squabbles and worthless fights would end. He declared. This is my way of paving the first step for him to achieve that. Sasami had no idea who he was talking about, but the sudden gasp she heard beside her and Akane's fingers tightening over hers, squeezing noticeably, told her the redhead was a wholly different case. My terms are simple, Gaara declared, looking at both men with a calm, quiet patience. Both of you, return to each other your respective acquisitions. Your forces return to Kumogakure quietly. Suna and Kiri will both move to force disengagements across the Iwa Konoha front. Once all sides are disengaged, a summit will be gathered to declare a formal peace treaty between all 5 nations. No sides will gain territory, no sides will lose territory. If war crimes are committed, reparations will be allocated as determined after a 5-village tribunal. You talk of peace while holding a knife to our throat, Kakashi said quietly. I am forcing you to pull away the knives you already have at each other's throats, Gaara corrected. His eyes darted to Kakashi. And if Konoha becomes the aggressor? Then they will lose all our military support, and will once again return to their untenable position, only this time dash. And Gaara turned his gaze onto Kakashi in a clear warning. We will not arrive in time to help again. The Hokage sat utterly still, saying nothing. However, was not silent. The man offered a snort. You are a piece of work, he said. You think I don't know about you, Sabaku? How did you come to be Kazekage at your age? Through peace and an aversion to violence? What about the people of your village who never would have accepted a Jinchuriki in such a position? The frenzies when you lost control people still talk of. Your own rule was baptized in blood, and now you want to stand there and declare yourself the sanctimonious judge of those who died for their villages? The Kazekage took a deep breath through his nostrils. You're probably right, he admitted slowly. But even if all I do is prove myself a hypocrite, isn't the chance alone worth the attempt? He asked, meeting A's accusing glare. A peaceful world that we can aspire to. That we might eventually become worthy of? He asked. Anything that may have been gained or proven by blood and death must have been proven and earned by now. His voice lost the dispassion, gaining an edge of, almost pleading, imploring the older man in front of him. There was silence in the clearing, and none seemed capable of even breathing in that moment. I accept. She didn't recognize the voice, and it was only as Akane and the others turned to her did she realize she herself had been the one to speak. The 3 Kage turned, looking at her, and Sasami felt a knot strangle her suddenly, looking down into her lap. Sasami-chan? Akane whispered, asking without asking. Somehow, the 7-year-old found her courage. Fisting the cloth at her lap she stood, stepping forward on the palanquin. As the Fire Lady of Hai no Kuni, she forced herself to say, her voice breathy and nearly lost in the morning air. I agree and accept the Kazekage's proposal on behalf of Kanehigakure no Sato. Kakashi's mask hid his features, and what she could say was a mask itself of careful neutrality. The Kazekage nodded, in genuine gratitude. The eyes turned to A. The mountain of a man glared. The Kazekage's gaze softened. Is peace really so impossible for us, Reikage Dano? His eyes focused, turning immediately back around and rushing towards Itachi. And Chan! She grimaced as he skidded to a halt at her side, knees digging into the earth, as she opened her dark black eyes. You really need to stop with that name. He smiled, relief almost crippling him outright as he leaned forward, his head grazing hers, uncaring to the blood still trailing down her head. Sorry. He lied. She offered a skeptical HN in response. Then, quietly, she leaned forward, pressing her lips to his, startling him with the abruptness of it. When they broke away, she lingered close enough for her breathing to mingle with his own, forehead pressed against his. Thought you wanted to keep it a secret? He wondered. Shut up, she demanded, taking a slow, deep breath before placing her head on his shoulder. We're fine, by the way. Naruto startled, turning to look at Sasuke and Sakura, with the Uchiha looking quite irritated and Sakura smiling, even though she was clearly limping and leaning over Sasuke's shoulder. Naruto had the decency to look apologetic. Sorry, but you're both medics and we're not the ones kissing your boo-boos better. Sakura wiggled her eyebrows. Sasuke actually shuddered. Can you not? She laughed. Then Naruto noticed the gold began to recede. He blinked and again, the world fell away, leaving him staring into the looming bars. And the slowly vanishing Kurama. No! He stepped forward, reaching through the bars. No! Hey! It's over! The giant fox leaned down, his muzzle to touch. No, boy. He huffed. It's not. Naruto stared up, blood-red eyes stared back, still weary, still exhausted, but unbroken. You're gonna disappear too, aren't you? The silence hung heavy between them. The fight isn't over, he repeated. Naruto felt his features scrunch up. You! Sasuke! Sakura! This isn't fair. Life is fair now? Its laugh was a rumble, slow and languid, its tails moving back and forth in the moment of mirth. Be serious, the blonde demanded. The kitsune shook his head. Stop complaining. If you get a chance to actually say a goodbye. He was right, he knew that 100 times over, and yet. I'm not saying goodbye, he swore. I'm going to get you out of there. His friend didn't look surprised. You would risk his escape, he warned, but his voice seemed more resigned than cautionary. I'm not abandoning you. Kurama snorted. No, you wouldn't, would you? The kitsune was half gone now, the crumbling of his form now reaching up to his throat and crawling towards his face. I have something for you. Something I've kept safe. Naruto stared surprised, blinking up at the large fox as his friend looked back behind him. The plip-plop of footsteps startled him even more. And when the source came into the light, it was him. Smaller. Younger. Still dressed in his bed clothing, the him that was not him waved with a shy smile. The transference would have destroyed him, Kurama explained. Now you are aware and he is strong enough. Immediately, a feeling of guilt began to well up inside of him. He hadn't considered it. There'd been so much they hadn't considered, hadn't had the time to consider. But he'd taken him, a lifetime from him. Hi, his younger self said, smiling brightly. Hey. He answered back in reflex, kneeling to be at eye level with the apparition. The silence now was awkward, hesitant. So he said the only thing he could. I'm sorry. His younger self shrugged. Hey, it's okay. I mean, you needed to stop the bad guy, right? And Kurama needed company. He smiled, megawatt bright. I made a friend. It's okay. The guilt didn't ease, if anything it grew. It's not fair, he thought again. He reached forward for the boy's hand. The younger him blinked, then turned to the half-faded Kurama. Won't you be lonely now? The kitsune snorted. Take your step, boy. The younger version of him looked up at the beast, then darted back, glomping the still present limb of the demon, squeezing tight before rushing back and reaching for Naruto's hand. When he opened his eyes, the glow was nearly gone, dispersing like embers in the wind and the presence. The touch of his other self was at the back of his mind, bright and innocent and calming. Sasuke and Sakura were glowing too. Wisps of blue and pink were wreathed over them like a corona, and Naruto shot to his feet, stepping towards them. Sasuke stared at him, and just by the look on his face Naruto could tell it was his student, not his teammate. The Uchiha shook his head. There's too little left. I'm sorry. It felt like a punch to the gut, and the pulse of soothing calm he felt from his own other wasn't enough to ease the pain. He looked to Sakura, but she smiled. She's still here, the Pinkette said. And again, he felt the shift in her. Saw the moment she changed. She stepped closer, and immediately the blonde opened his arms to take her into a fierce hug. I think he just ran when he realized you're dating Itachi of all people. He choked on a laugh that threatened to become a sob. She pulled away, green eyes looking at him. It'll be okay, she promised. He shook his head, crying as he sucked down a tremulous breath. It's not fair, he repeated. No, she agreed, reaching up to place a hand over his cheek. It's not. But it's okay, you'll be okay. Promise me. He felt the wind knocked out of him. That's not fair either. Her hands gripped his jacket tightly, creaking the leather. Promise. Me, she insisted. What else could he do? I promise, he choked out. And with a small smile, she was gone. He saw the light of the other Sakura staring out of those eyes now. Her gaze glittered with tears as she looked at him before stepping forward and wrapping him in a hug all over again. It was a good speech. Gaara turned, finding the Kiri Kunoichi Haku-san, her steps light, hands clasped behind her back as they were escorted through the village streets. He offered her a nod. Thank you, but I merely spoke what I thought to be true. She smiled. I think that's what made it so good. After a moment, she extended her hand and laughed. After so long corresponding, I rather forgot that we've never actually met in person. So let's make it official. I'm Yuki Haku, Kunoichi of Kiri and friend to Uzumaki Naruto. The Kazekage offered his own smile, taking her hand in his. Sabaku no Gaara, Kazekage of Sunagakure and also a friend of Uzumaki Naruto. Came a sound from her, their hands parting as her eyes trailed up to the sky. Do you think it's possible? She asked suddenly. I mean, really possible? She didn't need to specify. I'm willing to try, he said by way of answer. And I've never known Naruto to lie before. She shook her head. Neither have I. Chapter 92, Epilogue. You're already moving in together? That's pretty fast, isn't it? The answer was a deadpan look, not from Sasuke, as one would suspect, but Sakura. Haven't you and Itachi been living together since before you were officially in a relationship? Naruto smiled, scratching the back of his head with an awkward laugh. Guess you got me there, he conceded. Our lifestyles don't exactly encourage taking our time. Sasuke elaborated, chewing on a bite of his sushi roll. Fair. The blonde conceded again, then thought. Though I can't imagine your parents are happy. I know your dad threw a fit when he found out about me and Itachi. They're not. Sasuke shrugged. Actually, amend that, my father and Hisashi aren't happy. My mother is quite pleased. Or at least she seemed so when I told her. Well, I say good for you. Sakura smiled. And just say the word and I will cut someone for you, Sasuke. Thanks. But Hokage-sama is actually warning both our parents not to interfere with us. Seriously? Naruto blinked. I mean, that's great, but last I checked I don't think the Hokage have the authority to interfere with clan affairs. They don't, but in his words to Hisashi, she ceased to solely be your successor when she became my right-hand authority, or not, he's forcing himself into the mix. Huh, the blonde uttered. Then Sasuke eyed him, taking another bite of his food. What about you? What about me? Come on, Naruto. Sakura chimed in. When are you getting married? She smiled brightly. Ah dash. Sasuke's face was deadpan. I was actually asking about his recent promotion. Oh. The Pinkette started, then giggled as she caught the completely done look in Sasuke's expression. Right. Yeah, what about that? Her giggles became snorting snickers. It's not a promotion, the blonde protested. Well, I'm friends with Gaara the Kazekage and Haku the Kiri diplomat, so Kakashi-sensei is making me the official coordinator of the peace talks with them. It's a temporary thing until this whole issue is settled. He shrugged. A lot of people are saying it places you one step closer to Hokage. Sakura waggled her eyebrows. Quite a few are saying you and Itachi are on the very short list for Godame in a few years. Sasuke added. If she gets it, would that upset you? He asked, genuinely curious. If you would have asked me when I was younger, probably. Then he grinned stupidly. But honestly, she'd be a great Hokage. So no, probably not. I bet you say that to all the girls you sleep with. Sakura winked. Sasuke threw down his chopsticks. I think I'm going to pay the check and then promptly throw up somewhere. He groused. You gotta get over it sometime, you big baby. Sakura laughed, then quickly stole a glance at the time. Ah hell. I gotta get going dash. Noting her sudden rush, Sasuke and Naruto stole a glance at the wall clock too. Oh crap. The blonde balked. Standing up, he quickly grabbed his things and rushed out the door. Nissa Talclete for a meeting, will see you was later by. Sasuke caught half of that, and then noted Sakura had disappeared as well. Then, he realized something else. He took out his wallet, grumbling with irritation and vowing revenge at having been left to foot the bill. The chains rattled when she woke. Her hands were bound, her feet as well. The carriage jostled and lurched as it moved. Her back ached and her neck felt stiff. She could spy the light of the early sun peeking through the small openings of her wooden prison. She tried to focus, feel her chakra, but of course the shackles immediately glowed. Chakra suppressant seals. She was stuck for now. And so, Kuratsuchi sat quietly, her back pressed to one side of the cart and listened. A single horse was pulling her. 2, 3, 4. 6 men. 4 walking around her, one driving the carriage, and another in the trees above. She didn't know their ranks, or even their affiliation. Now that she considered it, she could barely remember her capture. Something slipped into her drink perhaps? Or her food? Quietly, the horse and cart plodded along. Finally, they came to a stop. Unless she'd been asleep for days and she wasn't nearly hungry enough for that, there was only one place she could be. Halt! Someone cried outside. You approach the gates of Kanahagakure no Sato. State your business. She wasn't allowed to see the village, though she could hear the sounds easily. The sound of hammers against wood, saws grinding, people calling out to others. It sounded as though they were still rebuilding from Kumo's attack, if she had to guess. She wondered briefly how much damage had been done, or if she'd lived long enough to perhaps see it for herself. They moved along the road, and the sounds of construction changed to something different, more lively, more people moving closer, gossip, chatter. Not military, civilian, moving through the village proper now, perhaps the central plaza, or the market square. Then, after a while, the chatter died down. Silence reigned save for the song of birds in the nearby forests, and of course the plodding of the horse. Finally, they stopped. She wondered if they were at another gatehouse, or guard post, if she would hear the sentinels demand their information again. Maybe she could get an idea of who was in charge, recognize a voice or two. Then the lock of her door cranked open. The sunlight burned her retinas, she shut her eyes tight and flinched away, peeking them open slowly as the guard stood just outside. As her eyes adjusted to the light, she recognized the person outside. I should have guessed they'd have sent you to catch me. It was true. She should have. But a part of her had hoped the woman would say no to such an order. She'd thought Itachi and she were friends after all. The Uchiha nodded. I am one of the few who could capture you without running the risk of unnecessary force. Kuratsuchi huffed out a breath. So it'll be a public execution then? She hadn't wanted that. For months she'd worked to run, to get away. But her options quickly vanished, one after the next after the next. IWA would never take her back. Not again. Even if all of the witnesses to her betrayal were dead, her returning as the lone survivor with their dead S-class shinobi and yet another dead Tsuchikage left in her wake. At best her execution would be a quiet thing. A slash across the throat when she was asleep, or assigned to a suicide mission with partners who would make sure she wasn't quite so lucky again. Soon as close alliance with Konoha, along with Kiri, ever on the hunt for lucrative deals with the other villages, would turn her over in a heartbeat to either Konoha or IWA. The minor villages had been in a similar vein, too afraid of defying Konoha or with too much to gain from betraying her. Kumo had been her best option. They caught her before she could cross the border. One more day. That's all she'd have needed. But the gods she'd learned long ago were petty, cruel things. She would have opted for IWA now if she had a choice. At least there her death wouldn't be a spectacle for the public. Itachi stepped into the carriage, leaning close and much to Kuratsuchi's surprise removed the shackles on her wrists. The metal clattered to the floor of the carriage, thumping onto the floor with a heavy crack. The former IWA kunoichi stared at the discarded chains, rubbing at her wrists. Her eyes panned upwards, staring into the Uchiha woman's black orbs. "What is this?" she asked. Itachi stood. "I did not bring you here to kill you. You don't have the authority to prevent it." Kuratsuchi argued back. "No, I don't," came the simple answer, before she gestured to the open door. Slowly, cautiously, the IWA princess stood, and made her way outside. Stepping out of the inner gloom, Kuratsuchi found she wasn't standing in a prison courtyard, or within the IT compound. No. She stood in the courtyard of an estate. It was large, almost lavish. Traditional architecture. 2 stories it rested at the edge of the village itself. She could just catch a glimpse of the walls beyond the canopy of the tall trees. "What is this place?" she asked. Itachi didn't answer. "Come." They made their way through the halls of the estate, and immediately, Kuratsuchi realized where she was being led. It wasn't through some epiphany, or some marking or symbol. It was the guards. After all, only one group of guards was authorized to wear the red armor of the royal house of the daimyo. Immediately, her desire to flee nearly overwhelmed her. It had been present before, of course, but almost in a dispassionate, base desire now. It was almost a genuine, clawing fear that ripped through her insides, slowing her steps and searching for an escape. But she couldn't. Itachi had always been stronger than her, always been stronger than all of them, and that had been before her ascendancy into the realms of impossibility with the unlocking of that legendary eye. She would catch her. And just like her fear, her pride still carried some sway within her, some kernel of its flickering flame demanding she not be dragged before a girl she'd seen as a toddler like a pitiful animal, dragged to the slaughter pen. Even if the thought of that little girl ordering her death was something she found too sickening to contemplate. Finally, she settled on a compromise. "Stop." Her words had an effect. Itachi turned, looking over her shoulder with a gaze of aloof indifference. "Don't do this," she pleaded, and in spite of herself, felt the beginnings of tears burning at the back of her eyes. "This is cruel," she hissed. Itachi stared back at her, features unreadable. "I did not bring you here to kill you," she repeated. "That's the only way this ends," Kuratsuchi protested. "She wants me dead for Magajiro. Your whole damn country wants me dead for Magajiro. Catching me and letting me go will throw a wrench in those supposed peace talks, so stop lying to Dash." She started, the answer coming to her. They were going to trade her. Catching her and letting her go wasn't an option. Itachi supposedly hadn't brought her here to kill her, so they would simply be transporting her elsewhere to get it done. Likely she was here to satisfy little Sasame's curiosity. After that, Hainokuni avenges their daimyo, and secures a better peace deal by handing her over. Shrewd. Her shoulders sagged and the urge to cry grew in the depths of her chest before she ruthlessly stamped it down. Let's just get this over with." She swallowed thickly, forcing every feeling, every hurt and agony down again as she had so many times before. Itachi watched her and Kuratsuchi could see nothing in those eyes. No hint of her own feelings, of anything that would reflect the friendship they'd shared. "I didn't bring you here to kill you," she repeated quietly. Kuratsuchi didn't respond. No point. She began to walk, Itachi did the same. After another few turns and hallways, they came to a door, guarded by 2 heavily armored samurai and 2 shinobi, the symbol of the fire guardians emblazoned on their shoulder guards. The samurai eyed Itachi and Kuratsuchi. "The prisoner is not in chains," the man's voice growled out of his helm. "She is not a prisoner," the Uchiha answered simply, startling her. The samurai seemed ready to argue. Then his partner beside him leaned close, whispering something. The man backed off, but stared at Itachi. "By standing order, you may enter. But her acts are your responsibility within." Itachi nodded. "Understood." The doors opened. They entered into a small indoor shrine. There was another fire guardian within, a young woman, with wild, fire-red hair. Unlike the others, she wore no mask, Beside her, Naruto, and in spite of the circumstances, a wellspring of genuine relief bloomed in Kuratsuchi's chest, cooling the burning within briefly with genuine happiness. And there, kneeling at the base of the shrine, one dedicated to Magajiro Kutu and his late wife Sasami. She was a small, tiny thing still, dressed in robes of opulent red, dark hair tied in a topknot fitted into a crown of rubies and emerald. She turned, adjusting her kneeling position to look over her shoulder, and Kuratsuchi found herself staring at the young girl she'd met so very long ago here, at the foot of her father's grave. The father who the whole world believed she'd killed. And Chan! Naruto could feel the grin on his face, wide and bright, and it was a struggle to not immediately rush over and take hold of the dark-haired beauty. He noted her eyes close, the barest hint of an exasperated smile beginning to form on her face before it evaporated as though it had never been there. "You really must stop with that name," she complained. He grinned. Akane grinned, waving merrily. "Hi, Itachi-chan." There was movement beside him, and Sasami's hesitant voice called up, "This is her then dash." Immediately, the mood within the room shifted, growing somber and serious. Naruto's eyes turned towards Kuratsuchi. The IWA princess looked thinner, haggard. There were dark circles under her eyes, her skin pallid. She looked frail, beaten down. "Yes." He nodded. "This is Kuratsuchi." He stepped forward, away from Sasami and towards his friend. "How have you been?" he asked. Pink eyes met his blue ones, and she offered a shrug. He felt a pang of sadness. "I heard you're the one who saved me," he ventured tentatively. "Guess I did," she offered with a shrug. "I'm glad that you survived. There were a lot of insane rumors. I wasn't sure if you made it out." "I did." He nodded. "There was a lot of insanity. I can tell you some of it later. Dash." She raised a slender eyebrow, then turned her gaze from him towards Sasami. The Lady of Fire looked at her, not rising from her kneeling position before the shrine. Then, adjusting the billowing sleeves of her formal wear, she gestured across from her. "Will you sit with me, Kuratsuchi-san?" Naruto could see her hesitate, see the confusion ghosting across her features. Then, with a halting step, she marched forward, kneeling on the mat across from the diminutive ruler. She sat stiffly watching the young Sasami in the same way one would look at a primed explosive. It was the girl who spoke first. "My advisors counseled against this meeting, despite Uzumaki-san's assurances." He caught the quick look out of the corner of Kuratsuchi's eyes fast, barely a moment before it returned to Sasami. "And what, exactly, did you bring me here for?" Now it was Sasami's turn to dart her eyes away, not to him, at first, but to Akane, who nodded encouragingly, and then to him. He did not know the girl, not really. It was Akane who had her trust, and through that trust she was extending it to him. "Naruto-san believes you're innocent," she finally said. "So I brought you here to ask, did you kill my father?" Kuratsuchi stared the girl down. "Would you believe anything I say?" "I am willing to judge for myself," she answered back, eyes now fixed and fierce. Kuratsuchi lowered her head. "Everyone's already told you I did." "That's not an answer." There was a silence now, thick and pregnant. Naruto stood back, beside Itachi, waiting with what he could admit was bated breath. "No," she finally said. "I didn't." Sasami seemed to sit perfectly still, watching Kuratsuchi. The incense candle on the shrine burned, thin trails of smoke passing between the two of them. Finally, "Did you love or hate my father?" The laugh Kuratsuchi let out was startling in its abruptness, almost breathless before she quickly covered her mouth. Now her eyes moved with something other than lethargy, other than apathy. Naruto couldn't identify it. "The world isn't a simple place, and your father wasn't a simple man." "Did I hate the man who took me from my home for a political victory?" "Yes." "Did I also love the man who raised me in his home, next to his children, had me trained to the best of his ability?" "I did." "Did I hate the man who sent me off as a piece on the board for his schemes? Who lied and manipulated a bad situation in his favor and damned the pawn he'd so readily discarded?" "Absolutely." "Do I love the man who tried to warn me of danger and gave me his weapon as the last measure of his protection before it was snatched away from me by others who answer to you?" "Yes." She took a deep breath through her nostrils and looked down to the floor. "Did I love or hate your father?" "Both is the simple answer." She shook her head. "But life doesn't conform to simple answers." She brought her eyes up again. "Whatever I feel, whatever I've done, it's mine, Magajiro-san. And I'm not going to explain, justify, or make excuses about it to you or anyone else. No matter what they're dangling in front of me. The silence came again. Overbearing and suffocating. Uzumaki-san dash, Sasami finally said. Believes you're innocent. The admission came. Sasami reached behind her, pulling free a small, pencil-thin scroll. Unfurling it, she placed the parchment on the floor between them. He wishes for me to extend to you a full pardon, the girl finally declared. Kuratsuchi felt her heart stutter in her chest, her breath hitch. Her head turned facing Naruto. He offered a nod, though he couldn't bring himself to smile. Kuratsuchi stared at him for a time, then she turned and looked into the lady's eyes. And you, what do you want, Sasami? What do you believe? The child ruler breathed slowly. Her eyes grew glassy, her gaze distant. I don't want wars. I don't want fighting. I don't want people dying pointlessly, for me or anyone else. Her eyes refocused and fixed themselves on Kuratsuchi. I don't know what to believe regarding you, Kuratsuchi-san. People say you killed a man I barely remember. People say you've betrayed Konoha. But they also say you've betrayed IWA. That you murdered my father and caused the death of the godamed Tsuchikage. That you work for us, and you work for them. She shrugged. Perhaps pardoning you is foolish. Perhaps Uzumaki-san is wrong, and you did kill my father. She rolled the scroll up, then held it out to Kuratsuchi. What I believe doesn't matter, she declared. What I want is an end to this pointless bloodshed. If you would be another step on the path to that goal, then reach out and take hold of it. The sun was beginning to fall by the time Naruto returned home. The door closed behind him, and he reached over, pulling the heavy cloak off of Itachi's shoulders. It's been a long day, she said. He agreed. I'll get some tea going. No, she called. Let me. You sure you've been traveling in dash? She leaned closer, and the kiss she pressed to him shut him up right quick. And you've been busy, she declared. Go. I'll be there shortly. Turning, she made her way to the kitchen, grabbing what she needed as Naruto folded her traveling cloak and placed it in the pile to wash soon. He started to get rid of some of his own outerwear, vest, heavy boots, headband, and other items, and left them in the pile to wash as well, before stepping out to the hallway. Itachi was there, standing at the doorway of a room. Oh. He stepped beside her, looking inside and finding the first designs on the walls. You've started? She asked. Preliminary research, he said slowly, not meeting her eyes. It was a collaborative effort last time. I don't have all the pieces. She said simply, looking onto the designs for a time before she looked at him. He mustered the courage and looked back. He expected disapproval, a reprimand, a cautionary warning of how Toby might be released completely in his effort to rescue Kurama. You're not in this alone, dash, is what she said. His heart stuttered, staring into onyx black. No, he never had been alone. Kurama was gone. Sasuke and Sakura too. But every step of the way. I'm here, she promised, one hand rising to press against his heart. No matter what you do, what risk you take, you only have to promise me one thing. Don't be stupid? He smiled weakly. She pressed another kiss against him, and there was nothing quick or chaste to this one. Away from prying eyes, isolated from the distractions of the world, he reciprocated until they were both short of breath, pulling away to press his forehead against hers, their breaths mingling. Come back, she demanded, and when he opened his eyes he saw her eyes shift to red, the Sharingan spinning gently within the iris. There was a command there. A compulsion, and he didn't try, or even want to resist it. Come back to me, she demanded. He closed his eyes, nodding against her. I promise,